Chapter 836. The Sage Devil Gorge was exceedingly vast and was enveloped by a heaven-piercing grand formation, located within the Dongshengshan Gate. This place was a tempering ground for the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Every set period of time, they would come here to temper their elites, choosing the most outstanding disciples. For those disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate who entered the Sage Devil Gorge, they would be able to engage in a life-and-death battle against those on the same level as them. It was extremely cruel, and it was unknown how many experts of the Dongshengshan Gate had fallen in this tempering ground. However, these experts could be considered as those on the same level as them who managed to escape. At this moment, the experts of the Dongshengshan Gate led the experts to the airspace above the Sage Devil Gorge. Qin Wentian stood in the air and stared downwards. Over there was a screen of light, and within this screen, there seemed to be a boundlessly vast gorge that seemed to be a world of its own. But standing in the air, one could see everything clearly with a single glance, as though the entire world was right before their eyes. When there are only 160 participants remaining, I will tell you all to stop fighting. Right now, there are already many disciples of the Eastern Sage Immortal Sect waiting for you in the Sage Devil Gorge. Don't have any wishful thinking. The moment you all enter, those at the same level as you will be able to sense your presence easily, and they will directly kill you. In here, no one is allowed to borrow the power of divine weapons or external sources of power. Qin Wentian spoke. The immortal king of the Dongshengshan Gate spoke. Everyone had solemn expressions on their faces. They knew that this battle would be extremely difficult. If they were the slightest bit careless, they might even die here. Okay, go on then. The immortal king of the Dongshengshan Gate waved his hand as everyone stepped out, entering the Sage Devil Gorge. If they entered, there was a high possibility that they might die. But once they passed this test, they would be able to become a core disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate and gain the qualifications to sit together with the supreme characters of the 13 prefectures. Such an opportunity was extremely hard to come by. To immortal kings, no matter how high your talent is, you are still in existence at the bottom of the hierarchy. Immortal kings could kill you with a wave of their hands. Back then, all of them were characters that exuded magnificence and magnificence. Their temperaments, good fortune, and countless years of bitter cultivation had forged their unparalleled statuses. They had to enter the Dongshengshan Gate and work hard in their cultivation, becoming immortal king existences that could look down on the masses with disdain. Even in the perspective of the 13 prefectures, they would be able to establish an incomparably tyrannical power, becoming a king character in their own prefecture. Numerous figures stepped into the Sage Devil Gorge, directly disappearing from their original spots. Qin Wentian's figure directly landed in a certain direction of the Sage Devil Gorge. There was a river beside him and a mountain in the distance. This Sage Devil Gorge was an independent space of its own. All my strength has been restored. However, since they are disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate, even if they are at the same level, their combat prowess would definitely be tyrannical. I have to be more careful. Qin Wentian silently mused. Extending his perception outwards, there was no one else in the surroundings. At another entrance of the Sage Devil Gorge, many geniuses clad in similar robes were gathered there. There were actually over 1,000 of them, many times more compared to those who entered the Sage Devil Gorge. The majority of these people were external disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate, but there was also a portion of them that were core disciples, and there were even elites among them. This difference could be seen from the robes they were wearing. The robes of the external disciples were all golden in color, while the robes of the core disciples were darker in color, exuding a heroic aura. As for the elites, other than golden, their robes were also shimmering with a crimson light, making them stand out from the crowd. And their statuses were also clearly differentiated, regardless of their cultivation bases. The elite disciples stood at the front, the core disciples stood in the middle, and the outer disciples stood at the back. This time around, we won't kill you and will show mercy. But there's no need to say more about how important this is to all of you. You have to do your best, don't throw away the face of the Dongshengshan Gate by not being able to deal with these newcomers. An elite disciple's eyes gleamed with an unyielding light as he stared into the distance. It was as though he could see many specks of light floating in the air. Each of these specks of light was an expert at the same cultivation level as him. Not only him, the others could also see people at the same cultivation level as them. They were all in the form of specks of light, floating in the air in various locations of the Sage Devil Gorge. These fellows still don't know that the moment they release their auras in the Sage Devil Gorge, they would be instantly exposed. Next, it's up to you all. That elite spoke again. With a wave of his hand, several thousand experts rushed out. Evidently, this wasn't a fair battle. Those who entered the Sage Devil Gorge couldn't see the existence of their opponents, but the other party could instantly lock onto their positions just because they released their auras. At this moment, everyone was moving about in the Sage Devil Gorge. They had no idea that the experts of the Dongshengshan Gate had already locked onto their positions and were rapidly closing in on them. Qin Wentian walked along the riverbank and came to the foot of an ancient tree. He sat down cross-legged, as though he was in a state of cultivation. However, a faint aura gushed forth from his body, as he remained vigilant of his surroundings, preparing for battle. Rustling sounds drifted over, like the footsteps of humans. Qin Wentian's aura fluctuated as he opened his eyes. A moment later, he saw a silhouette appearing not too far away from him. This person was clad in a faint golden robe, with magnificent diagrams inscribed on it. His eyes flickered with a brilliant light, extremely dazzling. This person was none other than an outer disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate. Qin Wentian of the Cloud Prefecture, number 27. That person glanced at Qin Wentian as his voice was calm. It's said that this time around the Dongshengshan Gate is recruiting a total of 160 core disciples. Based on the rankings, each of the 13 prefectures would only have 12 to 13 candidates. The Cloud Prefecture is weaker and the number of slots would be even lesser. You should also have the potential to become an outer disciple, but this is merely a potential. You have yet to officially enter the Dongshengshan Gate. Qin Wentian glanced at that person. Based on the rankings, this was indeed the case. A total of 160 core disciples, out of the 13 prefectures, it would already be considered not bad if the Cloud Prefecture could get 10 of them. And so? Qin Wentian asked. So, I'm afraid you won't be able to walk out of here. As that person spoke, he continued stepping forward, his eyes filled with a cold killing intent. Qin Wentian's eyes were filled with killing intent. Seems like you are merely an outer disciple. Since this is the case, scram. Qin Wentian faintly spoke before closing his eyes once more, disdainful of an outer disciple. That person halted his steps as a look of astonishment appeared on his face. After which, a devilish cold smile appeared on his face. How interesting, this was the first time he participated in the hunting exercise and he already met such an interesting person. He was even more arrogant compared to the core disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. His tone was so arrogant that it was ridiculous. What was even funnier was that this person didn't seem to notice it at all. He even closed his eyes, as though everything was so natural. He should be this arrogant. Bzz. Only to see that in the depths of his palms, his hands were instantly enveloped in golden flames. A mysterious flame circulated around his palms, causing sizzling sounds to echo in the air. In an instant, it was as though his entire body was bathed in the glow of the golden flames. His palms seemed to be able to slice apart the hardest object in the world. Boom! Stomping his foot on the ground, the earth beneath his feet was instantly incinerated into nothingness. A faint golden glow lingered around him as he rushed out. In an instant, his silhouette appeared in front of Qin Wentian as he slashed out with his palms. His palms seemed to have transformed into a sword of golden flames, slashing downwards. Qin Wentian was still sitting cross-legged. He lifted his palms, terrifying runic light flowed in his palms, exuding an indestructible will. Raising his palms, a gigantic palm imprint smashed out, directly colliding with the descending palm imprint. A muffled rumble rang out, but the gigantic palm imprint didn't move an inch. His opponent was actually unable to break it. However, the expression of that disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate didn't change. Abruptly, a dazzling light flashed from his body as boundless energy flowed on his palms. A terrifying palm imprint of flames appeared, directly melting Qin Wentian's gigantic palm imprint. At the same time, the sharpness of the palm imprint directly sliced downwards. Cracking sounds rang out as the gigantic palm imprint blasted out by Qin Wentian was sliced apart. That person had a mocking smile on his face as he stared at Qin Wentian, who was sitting cross-legged. Both of his palms simultaneously stabbed out with a fearsome might, the light from his palms capable of destroying everything, wanting to directly break apart Qin Wentian's body. Qin Wentian's palms shone with an even more dazzling light. When he blasted out, there was a terrifying suppressive force contained within. At the same time, the surrounding space seemed to be filled with a mysterious, indestructible power. With a thunderous boom, the attacks of the two of them collided once again. That disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate was actually forced backwards. His palms that contained tyrannical might actually had no way to penetrate through Qin Wentian's attack. Boom! His constellation manifested, transforming into golden palms of blazing flames that revolved around his body. His opponent roared in rage as he blasted out with the force of a tempestuous storm, aiming for Qin Wentian. You are courting death. A blood-colored light abruptly flashed in Qin Wentian's eyes as a halo of battle chi revolved around him, instantly erupting forth. The light radiating from him illuminated the skies as an incomparably powerful battle chi manifested, akin to a supreme battle king. His entire body shone with a towering blood-colored light as he lifted his palms for the third time. This time around, it was a heaven-conquering blood-colored palm imprint that blasted out, containing a towering might that could even kill gods. Boom, boom, boom. The fearsome heaven-conquering blood-colored palm imprint destroyed all defenses, shattering his opponent's attack. There was no way to block it and it directly slammed into his opponent's body. With a deafening boom, his opponent was directly flung through the air. In just an instant, the starlight in the sky dissipated. That disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate was already lying on the riverbank, dead on the spot. Qin Wentian continued to close his eyes, as though nothing had happened. If there was anyone else who came to disturb him, they would naturally understand after seeing his corpse. Chapter 837. Qin Wentian wasn't willing to waste time on killing. His purpose for coming to the Dongshengshan Gate was very clear. He wanted to participate in the Heavenly Talisman Realm's tempering exercise. And during the tempering exercise, raising his strength as much as possible was naturally Qin Wentian's priority. In the Eastern Sage Cliff, he comprehended many things and obtained many cultivation arts. This was especially so after he comprehended the Immortal Statue and obtained an Immortal King Inheritance battle art. His comprehension was extremely deep and he managed to cultivate it all the way to the 3rd level. In this Sage Devil Gorge, since there were no opportunities for cultivation, he would rather focus on comprehending them. If there were any disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate who wanted to use his life as a stepping stone, they better be prepared to pay the price. Qin Wentian left the corpse of a disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate behind. This was to deter others from disturbing him. However, Qin Wentian was wrong. After a period of time, 2 outer sect disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate arrived. When they saw the corpse, their gazes were extremely cold when they stared at Qin Wentian. This wasn't because they had a deep relationship with each other. There were countless disciples in the Dongshengshan Gate and each of them was competing against each other, trying to obtain more cultivation resources or be valued by the elders of the sect. The internal competition was extremely intense. But when they saw the corpse of a fellow disciple lying there, being used by Qin Wentian to deter them, their killing intent instantly gushed forth. How dare you? An expert spoke in cold arrogance. His gaze was as cold as ice, piercing towards Qin Wentian. The person beside him also had a sinister expression as his killing intent surged forth. Qin Wentian halted his cultivation and opened his eyes again, staring at the person who just arrived. You haven't even entered the Dongshengshan Gate yet you actually dare to use the corpse of a disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate to threaten us? Are you not afraid of dying without a burial? That person continued. Qin Wentian stared at him and asked, he wanted to kill me. Should I give him a proper burial after I kill him? Arrogant, this is a humiliation to the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. No matter what, you will die for sure. Even if the two of us can't kill you, we will make sure you die here. Another person spoke. Since Qin Wentian could kill an outer sect disciple, his strength must be extraordinary. Hence, they didn't dare to say that they could definitely kill Qin Wentian. One of them took out a treasure that shot out a beam of golden light that soared up into the sky. Instantly, many disciples of the Eastern Sage Immortal sect turned their gazes over as their countenances stiffened. Some of the core disciples in golden robes had sharp gazes as they stared at the golden beam of light in the air. Qin Wentian gate was. Many people looked down at the golden light. Some of them could see the floating light spot and immediately understood that this person's cultivation was the same as theirs. Immediately, the people around them flickered and rushed in that direction. At the same time, some people who participated in the trial like Qin Wentian had strange expressions on their faces. The people around them also rushed in that direction. Qin Wentian was still indifferent. He looked at the light and coldly stared at that person. He didn't do anything, he wasn't in a hurry to deal with that person. Regardless of whether it was the outer sect disciples or the core disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate, he didn't feel any fear. To him, since he wanted to be one of the top 3, it meant that he had the talent of the sun. The sun was a disciple of the Dongsheng Heaven Emperor. They had the highest status among the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Qin Wentian wanted to stand shoulder to shoulder with the sun, so why would he care about the so-called outer sect disciples and core disciples? In the same realm, no matter who came, he wasn't afraid, unless the other party attacked in groups. The 2 experts who arrived first didn't do anything. They just stared at Qin Wentian from both sides, as if they were just monitoring him and not letting him leave. However, they didn't know that if Qin Wentian wanted to leave, they wouldn't be able to stop him. After a while, another 2 outer sect disciples came. They saw the corpses by the river and immediately understood what was going on. They stared at Qin Wentian with a cold expression and said, "You haven't even entered the Dongshengshan Gate and you're already so arrogant. What a bold madman." Qin Wentian looked at the people who came one by one strangely and frowned. This was the cruel iron and blood test. These disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate were here to kill him, including the person who came to take his life. But now, these people were calling him a madman. Could it be that in the eyes of these disciples who had already entered the Dongshengshan Gate, only they were here to hunt and kill? Could it be that after these people killed him, Qin Wentian, they would give him a proper burial? Ignorant fool. Another voice drifted over. Qin Wentian glanced ahead only to see a disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate clad in golden robes walking over. The robes of the 5 of them were very similar and had the same pattern engraved on them. It was just that the color was different. This immediately made Qin Wentian understand that these people who came to the Saint Devil Canyon to kill them all had different statuses. Some were outer sect disciples, while some were core disciples. There were a lot of people in light golden robes, so they should be outer sect disciples. The person who came was even more arrogant and his aura was even stronger. He walked in the middle and should be a core disciple. His status was obvious with a single glance. Although you are here to participate in the recruitment test, you have yet to join the sect. You should have a heart filled with reverence for the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Yet you actually dared to use the identity of a disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate to threaten us? Foolish to the extreme. That expert who walked over coldly spoke, his tone filled with arrogance. He was a core disciple and had an extremely high status. There were many outer sect disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate, but it was extremely difficult for one to become a core disciple. This time around, how many geniuses from the 13 prefectures were participating? The competition started from the 13 prefectures, all for the sake of entering the Dongshengshan Gate. Becoming an outer sect disciple was already something to be proud of. Only the last 100+ would be able to become a core disciple. And as for him, he was already a core disciple, someone who was truly recognized by the sect. Not only that, he had already cultivated in the Dongshengshan Gate for a few years. His talent was outstanding and he naturally had the qualifications to be arrogant. For this hunt, the mission of core disciples wasn't to kill randomly. They could choose their targets, and for those with true talent, even if they could defeat them, they had to consider sparing them. This was their mission. Only the mission of the outer sect disciples was to kill. If they could be killed by an outer sect disciple, there was nothing to feel regretful about even if they died. As for the elite disciples, their purpose was only to monitor the entire Sage Devil Gorge. Qin Wentian stared at the person who just arrived. That person walked over step by step as he spoke. Even if you truly have talent, you can forget about leaving this place alive. Your corpse will be hung on the branches of a tree. This is the punishment for daring to use the corpse of a disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate to threaten us. How laughable. Qin Wentian kept listening to the arrogance of the other party, as though it was only natural that he, Qin Wentian, would be hunted down. And since he killed a disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate, using this person to threaten them was an unpardonable crime, a crime worthy of death. There were so many experts who came here just to kill him. When you die, you most probably won't find it funny anymore. The other party continued. Qin Wentian slowly stood up as his aura gushed forth. He stared at the four of them, his eyes gleaming with incomparable arrogance as he stood there proudly. It was as though he was the main character of this world. In the Sage Devil Gorge, the Dongshengshan Gate hunted us participants. This is a cold-blooded and cruel trial. In here, strength is everything. If you are weak, only death awaits you. If I am weak, the corpse lying on the ground right now would be me. Now, you guys are using this to suppress me. You guys think that because you are a disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate, your status is higher than me, and your strength is stronger than me. That's why you guys are speaking so confidently and with assurance, thinking that you're above everyone else. Qin Wentian swept his gaze over everyone as he floated up into the air. His eyes gleamed with a blood-red light, exuding an incomparably cold arrogance. You guys want my life, yet you're still talking to me about reverence? How ridiculous. I really want to see how the five of you can take my life away. Qin Wentian floated in the air, staring down at the five experts of the Dongshengshan Gate. With a thunderous boom, a battle halo flashed as the first level of his battle art was unleashed. He was like a battle king as his entire body underwent a transformation, exuding an extremely terrifying aura. That core disciple inclined his head and stared at the insufferably arrogant Qin Wentian as he spoke with cold arrogance. No wonder you have the strength to kill an outer disciple. But if you think that you don't have any reverence in your heart just because of this, you would truly overestimate yourself. Kill him. As the sound of his voice faded, the four outer disciples simultaneously soared up into the air as their terrifying auras engulfed the entire space. Different constellations were released at the same time, exuding terrifying might. Kill. One of them jabbed out with his finger. Momentarily, a surge of blood-colored energy congregated in the air, transforming into a towering tempest that directly slashed towards Qin Wentian. Another one blasted out a towering palm imprint, blotting out the sun. Another one slashed out with a saber, cleaving apart the void. As for the last one, he unleashed his controlling constellation. Countless demonic vines manifested around Qin Wentian, grabbing towards him in all directions. The four outer disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate joined forces to attack together. How terrifying was the might they unleashed. It definitely wasn't a simple 4 times increase in strength. For experts of their level, once they unleashed their constellations, they would be able to coordinate their attacks perfectly, making it so that their opponents had no hope of escaping. Even if their opponents were many times stronger than any of them, they would still be able to slay them with a single strike. Qin Wentian was directly buried within the might of their attacks. If his strength was only a notch higher compared to the 4 of them, he would already be a dead man right now. There was no way for him to survive. The eyes of the core disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate flickered with a mocking smile. This person underestimated the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate too much. Just a single strike was enough to reap his life. Boom! At this moment, a heaven-shaking bell chime rang out. After which, thunderous sounds echoed out unceasingly, shaking the heavens and earth. That core disciple turned his gaze over only to see a resplendent violet-gold light radiating forth. Rumbling sounds of explosions rang out unceasingly as the attacks of the 4 core disciples were all destroyed. Their bodies retreated with explosive speed, and some of them were even injured from the impact. In just an instant, the situation was reversed. Qin Wentian stood in the air, exuding a towering battle might. Blood-colored demonic light and violet-gold celestial constellations shone resplendently. He was like a supreme king, sweeping his gaze forward, exuding an aura of nobility that caused the hearts of others to shudder. Just a mere disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate. Let alone wanting to kill me, even if you didn't, how can you make me feel reverence for you? Qin Wentian stared at the core disciple below. After which, he stepped out as a gigantic palm imprint directly expanded in size, blasting out with the power to pluck the stars and seize the moon. One of the core disciples retreated with explosive speed, yet the gigantic palm imprint seemed to be able to pluck the sun, moon, and constellations from the heavens. With a thunderous boom, that core disciple's body exploded, dying on the spot. Since all of you want my life, leave your lives behind then. Qin Wentian domineeringly spoke. He stepped out in the air once more, causing the hearts of the core disciples to tremble. Chapter 838. The Dongshengshan Gate was a place filled with geniuses. Even for external disciples, only geniuses would be able to enter. However, there were naturally stronger geniuses among the geniuses. This time around, there were over 10,000 geniuses from the 13 prefectures. Which one of them wasn't a genius? However, the disparity between them was simply too great. 1,000 of them could enter the outer sect, over 100 could become core disciples, and 3 of them could become sage child characters. Although they were all geniuses, the disparity between them was still too great. For those geniuses from the 13 prefectures, if they were placed in the Dongshengshan Gate, they wouldn't even be considered geniuses. There were many geniuses who once stood at the peak of an entire region, exuding a towering aura during combat. But in front of those who were much stronger than them, they would instantly seem insignificant and would be easily killed. Just like now. When he saw the resplendent corona of light radiating from Qin Wentian, it was as though he was the descendant of a god king, a young battle king. Even the core disciple felt an intense pressure gushing towards him. Purple gold astral souls were already extremely rare. Even he didn't have one. Usually, only sage child characters would have a violet gold astral soul. Also, this person's arrogance towered up to the heavens, arrogantly saying that disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate would never be able to cause him to feel any fear or respect. Leaving aside the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate, he didn't even have any fear or respect for the Deep Flame Immortal King. Slash. A terrifying saber light slashed down. Qin Wentian transformed into a wind rock as he blasted out a blood-colored palm imprint, containing a suppressive might within, directly shattering the saber light. After which, his star-seizing palm imprint blasted out once more, blasting towards the second core disciple. That core disciple's bloodline power erupted forth as he unleashed his constellation, yet he still had no way to defend against Qin Wentian's attack. The Qin Wentian at this moment, other than using immortal arts, true intense, as well as his constellation, he also used his bloodline power, augmenting it with his combat immortal art. How terrifying was this? At the same level, even the outer sect disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate wouldn't be able to contend against him. A terrifying rumbling sound could be heard as the second expert was smashed by the star-plucking great palm. The other two were shocked, and their hearts trembled. They immediately turned around and fled. As disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate, they were originally here to hunt down the participants of the trial. But they were attacked by 4 people, and yet they were forced to flee. It could be said that it was a great humiliation to them. However, this person's strength was simply too shocking, and there was no way he could contend against him. He couldn't even withstand a single strike, and if he continued to fight like this, he could only flee. Do you think you can escape? Qin Wentian roared. Both of his palms simultaneously stretched out in different directions. His arms expanded explosively, transforming into incomparably gigantic arms. The blood-colored palm imprints he blasted out were even more terrifying, directly smashing towards the two disciples of the Dongshengshan gate. The two fleeing disciples felt the space around them being enveloped by a law energy as a look of despair flashed in their eyes. How could this be? Just a mere participant, how could his combat prowess be so tyrannical? Also, he was only ranked number 27 in the Cloud Prefecture. Although such a ranking could be considered not bad in the Cloud Prefecture, if it was placed in the perspective of the entire Eastern Sage 13 prefectures, he would directly be ranked outside the top 300. He basically didn't even have the qualifications to become a core disciple, yet he still dared to attack them in such a domineering manner. As two thunderous booms rang out, the two disciples were once again slain. The speed of the palm imprints was simply too fast, as though they could penetrate through space, arriving in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the four geniuses of the Dongshengshan gate who encircled Qin Wentian were all dead. Only a core disciple clad in golden robes remained standing there, staring at Qin Wentian as great waves of shock rocked his heart. Such a level of killing, he knew that he wouldn't be able to do it. Qin Wentian's gaze also landed on him. His demonic eyes shone with a towering battle might, as though he could see through the eyes of others with just a single glance. Now, do you still think that you are worthy enough for me to revere you in my heart? Qin Wentian spoke in arrogance. He stepped down as a halo of battle light enveloped him, unexcelled in the world. Boom! At this instant, the aura exuded by that core disciple erupted forth, rising to the peak in an instant. His body was enveloped by an incomparably gigantic demonic beast, a golden demonic lion with a pair of gigantic wings on its back. It was as though he was the king of all demons, unexcelled in the world. He was clad in a resplendent golden demonic lion battle armor as his eyes turned golden. He directly soared up into the air as an indomitable aura erupted forth. Although Qin Wentian's strength wasn't inferior to his, he was still a core disciple of the Dongshengshan gate. Why would he fear a battle? For this battle, he would go all out, killing with all his might. His constellation flashed as a pair of gigantic wings that blotted out the sun transformed into a sharp golden sword that directly slashed towards Qin Wentian. There was nothing it couldn't overcome, nothing it couldn't slash through. Qin Wentian's battle intent churned the heavens and earth. What was there to fear? His entire body glowed with a translucent light, as though he was clad in battle armor. His fiend god body refinement art had also strengthened his physique. The him right now was supported by all sorts of techniques and techniques. Just his aura alone was enough to crush geniuses at the same level as him. His violet gold astral soul was incomparably dazzling. Both his palms broke through the air, directly blasting out. However, the wings only slashed out in a frenzy, causing a blinding light to illuminate the skies as the sounds of collisions rang out unceasingly. A dazzling golden light erupted forth in all directions, causing the trees in the surroundings to be incinerated into dust. The earth cracked and the rivers flowed in reverse, as though the heavens and earth were about to collapse. I truly want to see how strong you are. This core disciple of the Dongshengshan gate also erupted forth with the power of his bloodline. His entire body glowed with a resplendent light, and the techniques he used were all immortal-ranked innate techniques that shook the heavens and earth. His aura soared unceasingly, as though he was getting more and more valiant as he fought. Qin Wentian used so many techniques yet his opponent was still able to withstand it. From this, one could see how powerful this core disciple of the Dongshengshan gate was. Not only that, he also had many techniques up his sleeves. Regardless of offense or defense, all of them were extremely tyrannical. At this moment, his opponent's wings slashed out, creating an opening in the sky. After which, an enraged beast surged forth, causing the heavens and earth to shatter. Qin Wentian frenziedly defended, blocking the attacks one after another. However, his opponent had a dazzling sharp sword that penetrated through the layers of attacks, directly piercing towards Qin Wentian's heart. It was as though he only needed an extremely short instant to reap away Qin Wentian's life. This attack was about to penetrate into Qin Wentian's heart. Die! That person roared in rage. But at this moment, the sound of bells ringing rang out. In front of Qin Wentian, numerous ancient bells suddenly appeared, forcibly blocking his attack. The ancient bells revolved around him, emitting a dazzling light. Qin Wentian waved his palms and blasted out in anger. The sound of the bells ringing unceasingly rang out as the ancient bells slammed into his opponent, causing him to spit out blood. After which, that inner disciple of the Dongshengshan gate saw a gigantic ancient bell smashing down towards him. Boom! A thunderous sound rang out, as though his soul was about to be shattered. Boundless light from the calamity slammed into his body, tearing it apart. In just an instant, the body of the inner disciple of the Dongshengshan gate directly shattered, vanishing into thin air. Qin Wentian had never been a merciful person. He could be kind to his family, friends, and even strangers. But when it came to those who wanted to take his life, he would never show any mercy. As for the fear and respect in his heart, that was simply laughable. After killing the 4 of them, his gaze abruptly turned over, staring at a certain direction. There were quite a few people currently spectating. However, Qin Wentian's gaze directly locked onto a certain direction. Over there, a figure walked out, his sharp eyes filled with killing intent landed on Qin Wentian as he stated, "Fascinating, truly fascinating." The person who walked out was none other than Black Peak. Right now, his aura was extremely powerful, towering up into the sky. Back then when Qin Wentian and Black Peak met at the Eastern Sage Cliff, Black Peak was already at the 8th level of Celestial Phenomenon. After he took on the Deep Flame Immortal King as his master, after several years of cultivation, although Black Peak didn't break through to the 9th level, his aura was already at the peak of the 8th level. Before this, because everyone's cultivation base in the Eastern Sage Cliff was the same, the disparity between their cultivation bases was obvious. Black Peak's aura could directly suppress Qin Wentian. However, Qin Wentian's countenance was incomparably calm. He naturally knew of Black Peak's cultivation base but he still spared him at the Eastern Sage Cliff. From this, one could see that in Qin Wentian's heart, he didn't care at all. He spared Black Peak, the disciple of the Deep Flame Immortal King, and didn't kill him. Qin Wentian emotionlessly glanced at Black Peak. After which, he flicked his sleeves and stepped out, directly departing the area. This battle had already alarmed many. Most probably, he wouldn't be able to cultivate in peace in this place. He could only change locations. "Help me keep an eye on him." Black Peak spoke. Beside him, a 5th-level ascendant from the Eastern Sage Immortal Sect walked over. Although Qin Wentian had already left, Black Peak could still see where Qin Wentian was heading to. Black Peak nodded his head lightly, "I will keep watch. Help me gather the elite disciples. I want the life of this man." Black Peak coldly spoke, his words causing the expression of that Dongshengshan Gate disciple to stiffen. However, he still nodded his head and took out a treasure. A beam of light shot out from it, but this beam of light was even more dazzling. Although elite disciples could enter this place, they wouldn't easily act against the participants here. However, it seemed that this disciple of the Deep Flame Immortal King, Black Peak, had a deep grudge with this man. An instant later, several experts arrived here. There were people of all cultivation bases here, including several elite disciples clad in resplendent robes. One of them stared at Black Peak and asked, "Black Peak, why are you here? Don't tell me you were the one who sent out the signal. Earlier, 5 of your junior apprentice brothers were killed by a single person, including a core disciple." Black Peak stared at that person as he spoke. The person beside him nodded his head, he had personally witnessed it. In that case, the talent of this man isn't bad, he would definitely be able to enter the ranks of core disciples. That elite disciple spoke. "But I want him to die." Black Peak spoke. "Can you do me a favor? Gather the 5th-level ascendants and kill him. Count it as me owing you a favor." Black Peak couldn't wait any longer. He wanted Qin Wentian's life. No matter how he died, he would rather owe a favor to Qin Wentian. Chapter 839. Although elite disciples would enter the Sage Devil Gorge, their existence was to supervise the gorge. Usually, they wouldn't act personally. In the Eastern Sage Immortal Sect, the status of an elite disciple was extremely high. They were chosen from the core disciples, and each elite disciple would take on an expert from the Eastern Sage Immortal sect as their master. There would be experts who would guide them in their cultivation, and if they advanced a step further, they would already be sage child characters. The purpose of the Sage Devil Gorge was to select 160 core disciples. If elite disciples acted, most probably not many would be able to withstand it. Those truly powerful geniuses would also be eliminated. Xia Ho was the leader of the elite disciples in charge of supervising the Sage Devil Gorge this time around. His cultivation base was extremely high and he had an esteemed status. When he heard Black Peak's words, he was somewhat bewildered as he replied, "Black Peak, you should know that the purpose of us elite disciples is to supervise and not to hunt. If I lead people to act against a participant, I might be reprimanded." "I understand. But as long as you don't act personally and only send 5th level ascendants to hunt him down, it wouldn't be considered breaking the rules of the sect. If you are reprimanded, you just need to find an excuse. You are the supervisor of the Sage Devil Gorge, and this young man killed and humiliated the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. His character isn't good, isn't it your responsibility to kill him?" Black Peak spoke. After that, he transmitted his voice to Xia Ho, causing Xia Ho's expression to brighten as he stared at Black Peak. For the sake of killing that young man, this fellow was truly willing to pay a heavy price. Seems like the hatred between him and Qin Wentian wasn't small. Also, given his identity as a supervisor, killing someone wasn't a big deal as long as he didn't break the rules. Black Peak was the personal disciple of the Deep Flame Immortal King, and the Deep Flame Immortal King was also a war general highly regarded by His Majesty. Since he was willing to pay such a price, Xia Ho naturally had to give him some face. One could only say that this young man was truly unlucky. This man humiliated a disciple of our Dongshengshan Gate, his character truly isn't good. He should be killed. Since this is the case, I will gather more people. Xia Ho and Black Peak exchanged glances. There was no need to say anything further. Gather more geniuses. This young man's combat prowess is extremely strong. I fought against him before in the Eastern Sage Cliff. Black Peak reminded. Even for elite disciples, it would be tough for them to defeat Qin Wentian in a one-on-one battle unless a sage child character acted. Alright. Xia Ho nodded and shot out a beam of light, issuing a command to gather everyone. As for the 5th level ascendant beside him, he had been monitoring Qin Wentian's movements. He discovered that Qin Wentian's light dot had actually stopped at a different location after traveling a great distance. Qin Wentian only wanted to find a quiet place to cultivate. At this moment, he arrived at the foot of an ancient mountain. From the top of the ancient mountain, a waterfall cascaded down, creating a deafening sound. The force of the waterfall was extremely strong. The water droplets converged to form a waterfall and flow down with such power. Qin Wentian murmured. He gazed at the waterfall and cultivated. After a while, his body moved and he turned around to look at the newcomer. He smiled and said, "We have such a tacit understanding." Gu Lufeng shook his head and smiled. "There are too many experts in the Dongshengshan Gate of the Sage Devil Gorge. We might encounter ambushes everywhere. I just want to find a quiet place. I believe that given your strength, ordinary disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate wouldn't be able to do anything to you." Qin Wentian replied. "Outer disciples can be dealt with, but there are some core disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Things might be a little troublesome." Gu Liufeng's handsome eyes stared at the waterfall ahead as he continued, "What about you? You should have encountered quite a number of people from the Dongshengshan Gate hunting you down, right?" There's no way for me to be at peace. They are here again." Qin Wentian spoke in a low voice. He turned and stared at the horizons only to see a group of figures rushing over. There were actually a total of 9 silhouettes, and there were even a few with tyrannical auras among them. It was obvious that they weren't on the same level as him. How persistent. Qin Wentian stared at Black Peak. On the other side, there were also several silhouettes rushing over. They seemed to be targeting Gu Lufeng because their cultivation bases were the same as Gu Lufeng, at the 4th level of Celestial Phenomenon. Qin Wentian's eyes flashed with sharpness. The people from both sides arrived at the same time, and they were so focused on each other. It was as though their movements could be directly locked onto by the other party. Interesting, I met two of them at the same time. Blackpeak's countenance flickered with a cold light when he saw Gu Lufeng. Back then when he went to the inn, this person was already together with Qin Wentian. Since they met at the same time, he might as well finish them off together. Gu Lufeng also saw Blackpeak, as well as the group of people beside him. His countenance instantly turned unsightly to behold. Not only were there core disciples in golden robes, there were also several other disciples in golden robes whom he had never seen before. Their auras were even stronger, and standing in the middle, it was evident that their statuses were higher than the core disciples. Before this, we met some outer and core disciples. What are your identities then? Qin Wentian stared at Xia Ho, who was in the lead. Elite disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Before Xia Ho could reply, Blackpeak already replied, Qin Wentian, you have nothing in your eyes, slaughtering disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. I've already said it, you won't be able to escape death. Qin Wentian's countenance remained calm. He continued to stare at Xia Ho as he spoke. In this tempering exercise, the 160 participants can become core disciples. As for you guys, you are all elite disciples. If you meet someone who has the talent to become a core disciple, wouldn't you all be easily eliminated? What's the meaning of this tempering exercise? If I'm not wrong, elite disciples shouldn't act so casually, right? Xia Ho stared at Qin Wentian, his countenance indifferent as he said, you are very smart. However, as Blackpeak said, even before entering my Dongshengshan Gate, you are already so arrogant and condescending, slaughtering and humiliating disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Such a person with a bad character isn't qualified to become a core disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate. I, Xia Ho, am the supervisor of the Sage Devil Gorge, so I have the obligation to kill you. Xia Ho's words, as the supervisor of the Sage Devil Gorge, he had the obligation to kill Qin Wentian. It was as if Qin Wentian deserved to die in the Sage Devil Gorge. Hearing this, Qin Wentian laughed arrogantly. Another bad character. Last time, the Dongsheng Heaven Emperor used this reason to humiliate him. Now, the elite disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate wanted to use this reason to deal with him. His body floated up as he arrogantly spoke, since you say that my character is bad, just treat it as my character is bad then. If you want to kill me, feel free to do so. I will deal with him. An elite disciple at the 5th level of Celestial Phenomenon spoke. No need, this brat's character is too low. You guys directly go up and kill him here, there's no need to show mercy. Xia Ho's eyes were cold as he stared at the elite disciple, giving the order to kill. Right. The few of them nodded. A moment later, 6 experts stepped out. 4 of them were core disciples and 2 of them were elite disciples. Their lineup was truly terrifying. Boom! One of the elite disciples released his constellation, causing the starry sky to shine. His body seemed to be carrying a supremely terrifying Xuanwu on his back, exuding a towering might. His palms blasted out towards Qin Wentian as runic light illuminated the sky. A towering divine might bore down on him, wanting to shatter this entire space. Qin Wentian's battle art erupted forth. He lifted his palms and blasted them into the skies, causing the air to tremble violently. The blood in this elite disciple's body erupted forth as boundless runic light circulated around him, transforming into a Xuanwu armor that was covered in countless runic patterns. His defense was extremely shocking. He frenziedly attacked and in an instant, the two of them exchanged over 10 attacks, yet they had no way to shake each other. The elite disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate had gone through many rounds of selection and were accepted as personal disciples by experts of the immortal sect. They cultivated many immortal arts and innate techniques and were naturally extremely powerful. The other elite disciple also rushed over. His constellation was like a blazing sun sword diagram, incomparably dazzling. Countless sun swords descended from the sky, unceasingly slashing towards Qin Wentian. Each and every one of the sun swords contained a heaven-shaking might, capable of breaking apart everything. Qin Wentian's palms frenziedly blasted out, but against the ferocious attacks of the two elite disciples, his attack speed clearly wasn't fast enough. And in another direction, the four core disciples started their own attacks. If they fought against Qin Wentian alone, they might easily be defeated. But right now, there were two elite disciples fighting against Qin Wentian while they supported him. If their attacks landed on Qin Wentian, it would similarly be fatal. Aren't the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate a little too shameless? We came here to undergo the tempering exercise, yet you guys actually made the elite disciples and core disciples gang up on a single person? Gu Liufeng's aura fluctuated as he coldly spoke. Insulting my Dongshengshan Gate. Kill them all. Xia Ho faintly spoke, his countenance cold. He wouldn't go against the rules. Killing one was killing two was also killing. He was the supervisor of the Sage Devil Gorge, he still had this bit of authority. Those fourth-level ascendants rushed towards Gu Lufeng, only to see Gu Lufeng carrying numerous dazzling arrows on his back. Each and every arrow was akin to a rainbow, corroding the void and containing a terrifying penetrative force. At the same time, he retreated, increasing the distance between him and his pursuers. A cold smile flickered in Black Peak's eyes. Watching these two battles, Qin Wentian wanted to humiliate him. Naturally, he would make him pay the price. At this moment, Qin Wentian was surrounded by 6 experts and was in imminent danger. The elite disciple with the Xuanwu saber on his back was like an impenetrable shield, blocking all of Qin Wentian's attacks. Qin Wentian's attacks were also extremely powerful, capable of shaking the heavens and earth. Rumble, a terrifying rumbling sound rang out. Qin Wentian's body grew taller, instantly expanding to a size of 100 meters, resembling a gigantic mountain. The 6 experts all retreated, staring at Qin Wentian. Boom! Qin Wentian's gigantic body stretched out his palms, blotting out the skies as he grabbed towards the 2 core disciples. The 2 of them frenziedly attacked, yet they had no way to break through the blood-colored battle palm imprints, and were directly crushed into pieces. 2 terrifying palm imprints directly grabbed out, crushing the 2 core disciples into smithereens with a single clench. Qin Wentian's huge eyes stared at Xia Ho and Black Peak. His countenance was cold to the extreme as an intense killing intent surged within him. You will pay a painful price for your actions. Qin Wentian swept his gaze over to the 2 of them as his voice turned cold. He roared in rage, his might shaking the heavens as his anger seethed, causing Xia Ho's heart to tremble. However, he only saw Xia Ho shooting out a beam of light that was even more resplendent than before. This summoning summon was instantly seen by countless experts. Chapter 840. Qin Wentian's 100 zhang tall body was truly terrifying. When Xia Ho saw him killing 2 core disciples with a wave of his hand, he instantly understood that this person's strength was above that of an elite disciple. He was someone who could become an elite disciple the moment he entered the Dongshengshan Gate and might even have the chance to become a saint child in the future. But now that things have come to this, no matter what, he had to kill this person. At this moment, Qin Wentian was like a wild horse that had escaped its reins. He was extremely dangerous and had to be killed on the spot. Rumble. An incomparably powerful Xuanwu blasted towards Qin Wentian like an ancient god. Qin Wentian's 100 zhang tall body blasted out a punch, causing astral light to illuminate the skies, penetrating through the heavens and earth. Blazing runic light and towering energy directly shattered his opponent's attack. Both his palms blasted out explosively once more, causing a gigantic palm imprint to appear, engulfing the heavens and earth as it blasted towards the remaining 2 core disciples. The 2 of them had looks of terror on their faces as they used all of their strength to defend. However, when the strength of the attack reached a certain degree, it was akin to crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The bodies of the 2 core disciples exploded as they were killed on the spot. Qin Wentian was like an enraged god of war, slaughtering all living things. Bzz. A blazing sun sword that could incinerate everything slashed over, radiating sunlight as it pierced through Qin Wentian's body. Qin Wentian's gigantic body opened his mouth as numerous ancient bells appeared, transforming into an incomparably terrifying gigantic battle bell. With a wave of his hand, the bell chimes shook the heavens, containing a towering suppressive might within, clashing against the blazing sun sword, shattering it apart. The two elite disciples retreated, increasing the distance between them and Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian, who had transformed into a 100-meter-tall giant, was simply too much of a threat. Once they were struck by him, the consequences would be devastating. They had to be careful. From afar, more and more figures could be seen flying over. Qin Wentian stared at them. Elite disciples, core disciples, and outer sect disciples were all rushing over here. Earlier, the summoning signal the Eastern Sage Immortal sect released earlier was definitely an extremely important one, causing the disciples of the Eastern Sage Immortal sect who came to hunt in the Sage Devil Gorge to gather here. Gu Lu Feng, let's go. Qin Wentian spoke loudly. He then turned and walked away, his steps extremely large. Buzz. A strong wind blew past. Xia Ho's body instantly blocked Qin Wentian's path of retreat. He put his hands behind his back and stared at Qin Wentian's figure. You are so arrogant. You trampled on and killed the Celestial Sect's disciples. How can you leave alive? Are you going to violate the rules set by the Dongshengshan Gate? Qin Wentian said coldly. I'm the supervisor of the Sage Devil Gorge. Also, I won't act against you, so it naturally wouldn't be considered breaking the rules. Xia Ho spoke coldly and arrogantly. The experts who had just arrived all surrounded Qin Wentian. Buzz. A dazzling light flashed. This was none other than the long spear he forged in Drift's now ancient city. The long spear gleamed with immortal light. Qin Wentian directly pointed it at Xia Ho as he arrogantly spoke, if you dare to block my path, I will use my immortal weapon to kill you. If there are experts from the Dongshengshan Gate who blame me, I will ask them for the reason and see if you have violated the rules or not. As Qin Wentian spoke, he walked towards Xia Ho. The long spear in his hand expanded unceasingly, growing to several tens of meters long. It gleamed with a terrifying immortal light, as though wanting to destroy everything before it. Xia Ho only felt a dangerous aura enveloping him. His countenance turned ashen, he didn't expect that the participants here would actually dare to use an immortal weapon to threaten him. This was simply too audacious. Scram! Qin Wentian roared. Xia Ho stared fixedly at Qin Wentian, but eventually, he still chose to step aside. He wasn't afraid of Qin Wentian, but if Qin Wentian really used an immortal weapon to kill him and caused the matter to blow up, as the supervisor, he wouldn't be able to absolve himself from the blame. Although he was an elite disciple, he was only here under orders. Qin Wentian kept his immortal weapon and continued forward. However, more and more experts rushed over, surrounding him. All of them were disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Rumble. Boundless battle light flashed as Qin Wentian's 100-meter-tall body radiated a terrifying battle intent. His battle chi grew even more fearsome, towering up into the sky. This was the activation of the second level of the battle art. His strength rose explosively once again. Who dares to obstruct me? Qin Wentian lifted his palms and attacked. A thunderous boom rang out as the gigantic Calamity Annihilation ancient bell radiated boundless calamity light. Qin Wentian used the Fiend God Heavenly Suppression art to augment it, causing the gigantic bell to contain a towering suppressive might. The constellations in the air shone resplendently as they blasted into the ancient bell. Golden divine light erupted forth, instantly killing those who were struck by the bell. Even the outer sect disciples nearby were annihilated by the light. The more he fought, the stronger he got. Qin Wentian gave off a feeling that he was filled with boundless possibilities. The more powerful his opponents were, the more powerful he would be, allowing him to transform into an even more powerful existence. Xia Ho felt a sense of unease in his heart when he saw how powerful Qin Wentian was. If so many fifth-level ascendants still failed to kill Qin Wentian and allowed him to leave safely, Qin Wentian would definitely be enraged and take revenge. If that were to happen, it would definitely attract the attention of the upper echelons and he, Xia Ho, would definitely have to bear the blame. His gaze turned to Black Peak as his countenance grew unsightly. However, Black Peak's countenance was even uglier than his. Even with so many fifth-level ascendants, they still couldn't kill Qin Wendian. There were so many experts here, and the geniuses of the Dongshengshan Gate were all supreme geniuses. Yet they still couldn't kill Qin Wendian. Number 27 of the Cloud Prefecture. Was this really only the combat talent of the number 27 of the Cloud Prefecture? The people before him were all so powerful. In that case, the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate would be nothing more than a joke. Regardless of Xia Ho or Black Peak, it was already hard for them to dismount. This man killed so many disciples of our Dongshengshan Gate, trampling on the pride and dignity of our Dongshengshan Gate. How can we allow such a despicable character to pass the test and become an inner sect disciple? Everyone, let's act together and kill him here. Xia Ho's voice was filled with killing intent. Qin Wendian took a single step and traversed an extremely far distance. An elite disciple chased after him. Qin Wendian abruptly released his other two constellations, the Dream Constellation and the Sword Slaughter Constellation. In just an instant, that elite disciple who was chasing after Qin Wendian was already within the range of his constellation. Boundless killing intent blasted out, locking down the surroundings of that elite disciple. Qin Wendian merely took a single step and appeared in front of that elite disciple as a fearsome runic light circulated around his palms. Die! With a thunderous roar, he executed two battle arts. Blood-colored runic light, terrifying divine inscriptions, the fiend god heavenly suppression art, as well as the tyrannical strength of his fleshly body, slaying immortals and vanquishing gods, destroying everything before him. That elite disciple had a look of terror on his face. This entire space seemed to be filled with a supreme suppressive force. His body was under the pressure and he couldn't help but have a look of terror on his face, as well as despair. He had no way to defend against such an attack. The gigantic fiend god heavenly suppression palm imprint blasted downwards, directly annihilating that elite disciple. Tyrannical killing intent, unexcelled in the world. At the instant he killed that elite disciple, the other experts behind him also arrived, frenziedly launching attacks towards Qin Wendian. Xia Ho, who was standing in the air, had an ashen expression. The thing he didn't want to see the most still happened. An elite disciple had died. Although there were countless disciples in the Eastern Sage Immortal sect, the elite disciples were the highest-ranked characters other than the Sage Child. Every one of them was heavily nurtured by the Eastern Sage Immortal sect, and the death of any one of them had to be recorded clearly. Also, these elite disciples entered the Sage Devil Gorge with the identity of an inspector. They basically shouldn't die in there. Once an elite disciple died, they would definitely be investigated. Even if they killed Qin Wendian, they would still be punished. What's even more damnable was that Qin Wendian hasn't died yet. There seemed to be an inexhaustible supply of astral energy in his body. To stellar martial cultivators, the more powerful the innate techniques they used, the greater the amount of astral energy they would expend. Qin Wendian battled in all directions. Every strike of his contained a towering might, unleashing terrifying innate techniques. Such tyrannical attacks were extremely taxing on the astral energy in his body. A fifth-level ascendant fighting in such a frenzied manner, there was no way he would be able to sustain it for long. It should be soon. He definitely wouldn't be able to continue fighting like this. Xia Ho's countenance was as sharp as a blade. When he saw the attacks of so many experts rushing towards Qin Wendian, his eyes gleamed with sharpness. If the combined attacks of so many experts still couldn't kill Qin Wendian, the consequences would be extremely dire. Once Qin Wendian escaped, it was unknown how great the waves of anger would be. If they didn't surround Qin Wendian, no fifth-level ascendant would be able to withstand Qin Wendian's attacks. Even elite disciples wouldn't be able to do so. This point had already been tested earlier. Qin Wendian directly killed an elite disciple at the same level as him with a single strike. Countless attacks blasted towards Qin Wendian. Qin Wendian's feet trembled as a towering screen of swords appeared around him. Countless sharp swords, as well as the suppressive shadow, blasted outwards, causing the space around him to explode unceasingly. However, the attacks of these experts were simply too terrifying. They managed to shatter the screen of swords and continued on their way towards Qin Wentian's 100-meter-tall body. Qin Wentian pointed out with a finger that shook the heavens. A boundless sword might gushed forth, engulfing everything. At the same time, the ancient bell revolved around him, vibrating madly. Rumble, the rumbling sounds continued unceasingly. All the attacks around Qin Wentian were shattered apart. His 100-meter-tall body was forced backwards as wounds appeared on his armor. In fact, there was even demonic blood flowing out, as though every single drop of blood contained an extremely powerful aura. Boom! Qin Wentian turned and continued on his way, traversing through the air with every step he took. The experts of the Dongshengshan Gate chased after Qin Wentian. Initially, this was supposed to be a training ground for the experts of the Dongshengshan Gate. Yet now, this place had turned into an encirclement. Tens of powerful disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate were chasing after Qin Wentian. Gu Lufeng was also trapped in combat. Occasionally, he would glance at Qin Wentian's battle as his heart trembled. Qin Wentian was simply too powerful. During these few years, Qin Wentian had already left him in the dust. Upon thinking of this, Gu Lufeng unleashed his aura to the extreme, as though the magnificence he exuded in the past could be seen once again. As for Qin Wentian, would he be able to escape this calamity? Qin Wentian unceasingly advanced through the Sage Devil Gorge. Every step he took caused the heavens and earth to tremble, exuding a terrifying might. A pair of golden wings appeared behind his back, resembling a wind rock. Although his body was only 100 meters tall, his speed was extremely fast. Those experts who were chasing after him were actually slowly falling behind. This caused the countenances of many to turn extremely unsightly. If this continued on, the people who were chasing after Qin Wentian would continue to split up. At that time, once Qin Wentian erupted forth, it would be extremely dangerous for those who were chasing after him. Chapter 841. In the Sage Devil Gorge, everywhere Qin Wentian passed by, his aura would surge forth, akin to the rumbling of thunder. There were experts who inclined their heads and stared at Qin Wentian, only to see that there were actually so many experts chasing after him. Their hearts couldn't help but to tremble. Right now, they could naturally discern the identities of these disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate from their robes. Among the experts chasing after Qin Wentian, the ones closest to them were all clad in golden robes that were even more eye-catching compared to the robes of the core disciples. These were the elite disciples who rarely acted. By right, these people shouldn't be participating in the hunt, but right now, they were actually trying to kill one person at the same time. At this moment, the 100-meter-tall giant in front of the crowd suddenly stopped. At the instant he stopped, a terrifying gust of wind and clouds churned in the air, causing the elite disciples who were chasing after him to involuntarily halt their steps. That 100-meter-tall giant abruptly turned and took a step forward. His aura was like thunder, causing rumbling sounds to echo in the air. The countenances of the elite disciples changed. They actually didn't advance but retreated instead, as though they were extremely fearful of that 100-meter-tall giant. This caused a strange expression to appear on the faces of the crowd. Who was the one chasing who exactly? A bunch of trash. You actually have the face to ask me to respect you? A thunderous voice shook the heavens and earth. Qin Wentian's voice and countenance were all filled with ridicule. This wasn't merely a mockery towards the elite disciples in front of him, it was also a mockery towards all the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. The disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate were all chasing after one person. When he stopped, no one else dared to move forward. He then took a step forward, causing all the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate to retreat. How could there be such a ridiculous pursuit in the world? How arrogant! The spectators below all felt their hearts trembling when they saw this scene. Who exactly was this person? He actually dared to treat the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate as trash and humiliated them in public. And as expected, the expressions of the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate turned ashen. In the Sage Devil Gorge, they were supposed to be the hunters, but the current situation was truly somewhat awkward. From afar, more and more disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate rushed over. Qin Wentian's lips curled up in disdain as he stared at Xia Ho and Hei Feng. I advise you guys to stop wasting your efforts trying to kill me. Just based on your arrogance, but in reality, you are all weaklings. If you continue to try to kill me, I'm afraid your lives would be in danger. After speaking, Qin Wentian directly turned and stepped out once more, causing the experts behind him to exchange glances, speechless. Qin Wentian's speed was extremely fast, ordinary disciples wouldn't be able to catch up to him at all. Even if there were only a few elite disciples who could catch up to Qin Wentian, so what? Once they started fighting, they wouldn't be able to stop him at all. In fact, they might even lose their lives and suffer counterattacks. This was truly an extremely ironic thing. How dare he humiliate all of you? Continue to pursue him, spare no expense to kill him. Xia Ho coldly spoke. The other experts continued their pursuit, and at the same time, Xia Ho once again issued a summon. The other experts could see the light dot representing Qin Wentian rapidly moving about. There were many experts who tried to intercept him, but when they appeared, they were all killed by a single slap from Qin Wentian. They weren't on the same level at all. The pursuit continued, and after a long time, Zi Qingxian, who was currently moving in a certain direction, suddenly saw Qin Wentian's silhouette in the air. Her gaze abruptly turned sharp as she stared in the direction behind Qin Wentian, instantly understanding what had happened. Her silhouette flickered, there seemed to be a pair of divine eagle wings behind her. She sped through the air with great speed and was actually parallel to Qin Wentian, moving in the same direction. Qin Wentian naturally also saw Zi Qingxian below him. He only saw Zi Qingxian following his footsteps, her silhouette flickering unceasingly. How can I help you? Zi Qingxian spoke. She didn't ask for the reason. There was no need to ask. Since she has already acknowledged Qin Wentian, her position would naturally be the same as Qin Wentian's. Right now, there were people chasing after Qin Wentian. In that case, she would naturally stand on Qin Wentian's side. I will accompany them to play a hunting game. Qin Wentian laughed as he stared at Zi Qingxian below. His huge eyes flickered with a dazzling light. If you don't want to die, don't participate. If not, the Dongshengshan Gate will definitely kill you. Someone behind threatened Zi Qingxian. However, Zi Qingxian continued moving together with Qin Wentian, not saying a word. Qingxian, kill the person who spoke. Qin Wentian spoke. His gigantic body halted. Zi Qingxuan's wings flickered as she turned and spun around, moving like a bolt of lightning. Qin Wentian soared through the air and sped towards the expert who spoke. Although there was still some distance between them, he didn't hesitate and blasted out a palm strike. This palm imprint appeared from the void and directly smashed down. That expert blasted out with both his palms, destroying Qin Wentian's attack. At the same time, Zi Qingxuan's silhouette arrived. The light of a divine falcon shone resplendently as her eyes gleamed with sharpness. Her body shuddered as countless divine falcons swooped down, tearing apart this space. That expert retreated, wanting to delay Zi Qingxuan's attack. Behind him, there was already an elite disciple rushing over. However, a thunderous boom rang out as Qin Wentian blasted out numerous palm imprints, directly blocking them. Qin Wentian himself also moved towards the elite disciple who threatened Zi Qingxian. Everything happened in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, so fast that it was inconceivable. That elite disciple was trapped by Zi Qingxuan's divine falcon light and was in a defensive stance. At this moment, Qin Wentian rushed out as a blood-colored long spear condensed from astral energy appeared in his hands. This long spear shone with an incomparably dazzling battle light, as though his battle incantation was imprinted onto it. The long spear expanded by over 10 meters, causing the space around it to tremble as a towering might gushed out. That elite disciple had a look of terror on his face, yet Zi Qingxian didn't relent. Finally, the long spear arrived, transforming into a beam of blood-colored light that directly pierced through the body of that elite disciple. There was no way for him to block it. That elite disciple howled in rage as he stabbed out with his spear. With a thunderous boom, that elite disciple's body was shattered into pieces. In the short span of a few breaths of time, an elite disciple was killed. Xia Ho, Black Peak and the rest could only watch with their own eyes, yet they couldn't interfere. Qin Wentian and Zi Qingxian seemed to have a tacit understanding. Both of them turned their gazes onto that elite disciple behind them. The others still haven't caught up yet. Qin Wentian waited for so long before attacking because he wanted to widen the distance between them. Only then would he be able to act, making them feel despair. The disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate ganged up to kill him. Let them pay the price then. BZZ. The dream constellation directly transformed into a domain-type constellation, enveloping his opponent within. After which, another heaven-shaking spear pierced out. This spear strike seemed to contain a law of energy within, causing the entire space to be filled with a stifling pressure. How powerful was Qin Wentian after he unleashed the second level of the battle art? This spear strike of his was akin to the spear of a war god. Zi Qingxian very tacitly blocked the path of retreat of her opponent as she attacked from behind. Before this, when the other experts joined forces to attack Qin Wentian, they couldn't do anything to him. But now, Qin Wentian and Zi Qingxian joined forces to attack an elite disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate. In just an instant, the long spear of the elite disciple was slain. In less than 10 breaths of time, 2 elite disciples were killed consecutively. Qin Wentian and Zi Qingxian directly sped away. When the other experts behind them wanted to continue their pursuit, Xia Ho finally stretched out his hands to block them. At this moment, Xia Ho had a gloomy expression on his face as he stared at the departing Qin Wentian. He knew that if this continued, the losses would be even greater. Whoever chased the fastest would die. And if everyone slowed down, this pursuit would be meaningless. Hence, Qin Wentian's so-called fleeing was merely leading them away. Are we going to let things end like this? Black Peak's expression turned black. Xia Ho was about to give up, sparing Qin Wentian just like that. After spending so much effort, he still failed to claim Qin Wentian's life. This was a great humiliation. What else can I do? Xia Ho stared at Black Peak, his eyes gleaming with sharpness. It was as though he had forgotten Black Peak's identity. The deaths of elite disciples were all incited by Black Peak. As the supervisor of the Sage Devil Gorge, the consequences would be shouldered by him. If this continued, he didn't dare to imagine what would happen. Although the cultivation bases of those elite disciples couldn't be compared to him, it was only because of the time they took to cultivate. His status was the same as them, an elite disciple, and he wasn't any nobler compared to them. For their deaths, the masters of those elite disciples would surely come and question them. The Dongshengshan Gate would also pursue the matter. Because of his decision, Xia Ho had caused the deaths of quite a few elite disciples. This crime wasn't light at all. The Dongshengshan Gate wouldn't punish Qin Wentian. Even if they wanted to protect him, there was no reason for them to do so. What qualifications did they have to blame a genius who resisted because he was being hunted? Also, given how dazzling Qin Wentian was, why didn't the Dongshengshan Gate recruit him? He could directly become an elite disciple, one that was even more outstanding compared to them. This person wouldn't do anything, would he? Xia Ho stared at the disappearing silhouette of Qin Wentian and muttered. Previously, they had angered Qin Wentian. If Qin Wentian were to be exposed, they would definitely regret it. Those blood-red eyes of his were truly terrifying. Naturally, this matter wouldn't end so quickly. Qin Wentian had always wanted to avoid this expedition. If the people of the Dongshengshan Gate wanted to be hunters, they could be hunters. Since it was a trial under someone else's roof, he would deal with whatever came his way. However, what happened later completely enraged him. As the supervisor, Xia Ho used the ridiculous reason of his character to lead the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate to surround and kill him. Since this was the case, from now on, he, Qin Wentian, was no longer the prey, but the hunter. Since the Dongshengshan Gate viewed them as prey, they could only passively wait to be hunted down. In that case, under this cruel rule, he would launch a counterattack that belonged to him. Qin Wentian soared in the air, his gaze sweeping out in all directions. He only saw two fifth-level ascendants currently fighting in a certain direction. One of them was a core disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate and wanted to hunt down a participant. Not only that, he already had the advantage and was closing in. At this moment, Qin Wentian stepped out, moving in that direction. The two combatants felt a towering might closing in on them. They separated and stared in the air. After which, a gigantic palm imprint slammed down, directly killing the core disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate. The countenance of the core disciple beside him changed drastically. He stared at Qin Wentian as his heart trembled. Since the people of the Dongshengshan Gate want to hunt us, why don't we retaliate? Follow me and kill the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate we meet. Qin Wentian spoke. The body of that core disciple trembled violently as a dazzling light shone in his eyes. That's right, they could only be hunted down. Right, I will follow you. That core disciple stepped out, following behind Qin Wentian. Chapter 842. In the Sage Devil Canyon, a storm was brewing. Before the lake, there was a fifth-level ascendant of the Dongshengshan Gate. His eyes gleamed with coldness as he stared at the specks of light moving closer to him, preparing to hunt them down. But at this moment, he suddenly frowned. From afar, there were 3 specks of light moving closer to him. Not long after, the 3 of them discovered him and directly sped over. Someone joined forces. The countenance of that core disciple stiffened, feeling somewhat bewildered. A raging wind gusted by as the silhouettes of the 3 experts appeared not far away. The blood-colored demonic eyes of the young man in the lead stared at him. This man was over 100 meters tall and exuded a towering battle might. He was clad in an unparalleled sacred armor, as though he wanted to conquer this world. Not good. The countenance of that core disciple was filled with terror. He discovered that the 3 of them were heading straight for him. Turning, he abruptly turned and fled, only to discover to his horror that the speed of the pursuers was exceedingly fast. A terrifying gigantic palm imprint grabbed over, and there was also a divine falcon whistling through the air, swooping down from the sky. Upon feeling the might of that attack, his countenance turned pale. He turned back only to see 2 streams of destructive energy blasting towards him. With a rumbling sound, his body was directly enveloped by the destructive energy, dying on the spot. Behind him, a 5th-level ascendant flew over just in time to witness this shocking scene. His heart pounded rapidly, and after which, he saw Qin Wentian staring at him as he spoke. In this Sage Devil Canyon, they can monitor our movements and hunt us down. Since you didn't die, it means that your strength isn't bad. This person is a core disciple and is preparing to hunt you down. Right now, I don't wish to wait for them to hunt me down, but I want to take the initiative to attack you instead. Are you willing to join me? The countenance of that core disciple flickered. During these few days, he had indeed encountered many hunters. If it wasn't for his strength being above average, he would have already died. But this person before him had tyrannical strength and even dared to take the initiative to hunt down the experts of the Dongshengshan Gate. If he could join him, he would have a higher chance of passing this round. Right. That core disciple nodded. Qin Wentian waved his hands, move out. The 4 of them walked in the void at the same time, and not long after, they encountered an outer sect disciple of Dongshengshan Gate. When he saw the 4 of them, he wanted to turn around and leave, but Qin Wentian killed him with a slap. A majestic storm of conquest had begun. They were going to cause a raging storm in the Sage Devil Gorge. They weren't going to exist as prey, but as hunters to face this cruel test. The weak were prey to the strong, so they would rather take the initiative to be a hunter than wait for others to hunt them down. Several days later, the hunting operation in the Sage Devil Canyon continued, and the number of challengers continued to decrease. However, the gathering storm had already taken shape. At this moment, an elite disciple at the 5th level of Celestial Phenomenon stared at a location not too far away from him. Over there, he saw 20 specks of light congregating together. This indicated that there were 25th level ascendants gathered there. These challengers were actually able to band together? If this was the case, things would definitely be troublesome. He had to gather the elite disciples to disrupt these people. If not, there was a high possibility that all 20 of them would pass this round, disrupting the original purpose of the Dongshengshin Gates test. As the supervisors, the elite disciples had to reorganize themselves. He took out his summoning token and shot out a beam of light that towered up into the skies. But at the instant the summoning token was sent out, he saw the 20 experts rushing over in his direction. Humph, that elite disciple snorted coldly. He wanted to see what these people wanted to do exactly. Given his strength, even if the other party outnumbered him, he believed that no one would be able to stop him if he wanted to leave. An instant later, the 20 experts appeared, exuding a fearsome aura as they swept over like a raging storm. Halt! That elite disciple roared, his voice akin to a tsunami, causing the entire space to tremble. However, the other party didn't slow down at all. Under the lead of the 100-meter giant in the lead, they directly soared through the air, rushing over. Bzz. A third eye appeared in the center of the 100-meter tall figure's brows. In just an instant, he was in a daze. After which, a thunderous rumbling sound rang out as a gigantic palm imprint slammed towards him. He howled in rage as a violent aura gushed forth, shattering the gigantic palm imprint. However, he only saw numerous silhouettes rushing towards him. His countenance stiffened and he wanted to turn around, yet the gigantic palm imprint slammed towards him once again, sealing the entire space around him. Shit! That elite disciple's countenance drastically changed. He didn't expect the group of experts to be so tyrannical. At this moment, his body felt as though it had sunk into a swamp, his footsteps were hindered and he had no way to retreat. The experts in front of him were already rushing over in a grandiose manner. Chaotic currents churned, shaking the heavens and earth as they frenziedly blasted towards him. A thunderous boom shook the heavens. In just an instant, that elite disciple was killed, falling from the air. That group of experts didn't stop, they continued their hunt. After they left, more and more experts arrived. When they saw the corpse of that elite disciple, their countenances were all extremely unsightly to behold. Xia Ho and Black Peak also arrived. At this moment, Xia Ho's body was trembling. He turned to a 5th-level ascendant beside him and asked, "How many people did they gather?" 20. That person stared at the direction where Qin Wentian and the others left. Xia Ho's countenance turned ashen. He didn't know how many disciples of the Dongshengshin Gate had fallen already, and it was also an elite disciple. Was this the anger of that person? Before this, he, Xia Ho, led the experts of the Dongshengshin Gate to surround and kill that person. But now, that person was using the same method to give them a taste of their own medicine. He started to lead the participants and madly hunted down the disciples of the Dongshengshin Gate. Nobody could stop him. He alone could fight against so many experts. Now that he was the one leading the attack, there was basically no one at the same level as him who could stop him unless there was a 5th-level Ascendant Sage Child character who appeared here to counterattack. What should we do? The people of the Dongshengshin Gate were all panicking. If this continued, there would only be more and more disciples of the Dongshengshin Gate dying. In that case, they, as the elite disciples of the Dongshengshin Gate, would forever become the joke of the Dongshengshin Gate. This was also a humiliation. As the examinees for this round of tempering, their purpose was to hunt and kill. But now, they were being killed one after another by the other participants. Xia Ho's countenance turned heavy. What should he do? He didn't know what to do either. Qin Wentian gathered 5th-level ascendants to hunt the disciples of the Dongshengshin Gate. Within the rules, this was permitted. But if the higher-level ascendants of the Dongshengshin Gate acted, it would be considered a violation of the rules. Even he, Xia Ho, wouldn't dare to be so brazen and openly challenge the rules set by the Dongshengshin Gate. And in truth, it was him, Xia Ho, who forced Qin Wentian to step on this path of conquest. It was him who led his men to kill Qin Wentian, but sadly, they didn't succeed. Hence, Qin Wentian wanted to use the same method to deal with the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Right now, the only thing that could stop Qin Wentian was to get the 5th-level ascendants of the Dongshengshan Gate to stop their hunt and gather together to surround Qin Wentian and his men. Summon all the elite disciples. Send out the summons for all 5th-level ascendants. Xia Ho's eyes were ice cold. The people in the surroundings nodded as they stared at the flashing lights. It seemed like this was the only way to stop Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian and his men continued their expedition. During this process, the number of experts they gathered grew increasingly terrifying. Qin Wentian's body returned to its normal size, and as the number of experts grew stronger, there was no need for him to be as violent as before. Among these experts, there were many powerful geniuses from the 13 prefectures that were ranked at the top. They were all lofty characters and weren't willing to be led by others. The moment they encountered disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate, they would just kill them directly. As time flowed by, not only them, Qin Wentian and the others discovered that the other participants were influenced by them. Their cultivation bases all started to gather and joined forces to slaughter the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. The battles in the Sage Devil Gorge grew more and more brutal. It was no longer a one-sided situation. The disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate all discovered this change. They no longer hunted alone but formed groups of 3 to 5. Gradually, they started to join forces, and in addition to the elite disciples taking the initiative to gather, experts from both sides gathered unceasingly. This storm unceasingly swept across the entire Sage Devil Gorge. Qin Wentian and his group already had over 40 experts. Everywhere they passed by, the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate who were at the same level as them would die without a doubt. However, they also discovered that the number of participants was decreasing, and it was getting harder and harder to encounter disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Not only 5th-level ascendants, it was even harder to encounter people of the other cultivation levels as well. At this moment, a terrifying aura gushed over from afar. An instant later, Qin Wentian saw another group of experts gathered here. There were over 30 of them, and all of them were at the 7th level of celestial phenomenon. The top ranker of the Cloud Prefecture, Gu Zhantian, was among them as well. He stood in the center, exuding an aura of a leader. His gaze instantly landed on Qin Wentian as a cold light flashed in his eyes. He had yet to settle the grudge between him and Qin Wentian. He hoped that Qin Wentian wouldn't be eliminated. The two groups of people brushed past each other, each of them had their own opponents. Not only for these two cultivation levels, at this moment, the experts of all 9 levels of the Sage Devil Gorge were all gathered here as well. However, they discovered that it was getting harder and harder to encounter people from the Dongshengshan Gate. In the end, they couldn't even see a single opportunity to do so. At this moment, in a certain direction of the Sage Devil Gorge, numerous figures clad in golden robes were gathered here. These figures were all clad in the same robes and were divided into 9 groups. All of them were disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. The elite disciples stood at the very front, leading the group. Xia Ho was among them. His eyes flickered with an extremely cold light as he stared at the horizons. This time around in the Sage Devil Gorge, their Dongshengshan Gate's losses were extremely heavy. Since this was the case, he wanted to make those people pay the most painful price. Right now, all the hunting disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate were gathered here for the final battle. Chapter 843. Although their losses were extremely heavy, the number of people from the Dongshengshan Gate was much higher compared to the number of geniuses who came to the Sage Devil Gorge. In addition to the fact that the people from the Dongshengshan Gate had the advantage at the start, they either hunted or chased the geniuses out of the Sage Devil Gorge. Only after that did the geniuses from the Dongshengshan Gate started to gather together and reverse the situation. But on the whole, the number of people from the Dongshengshan Gate in the Sage Devil Gorge was much higher compared to the number of geniuses who came here. This majestic tempest swept up almost everyone in the Sage Devil Gorge. There was no need to say anything more about the experts of the Eastern Sage Immortal sect. They gathered together, fighting for the sake of revenge, fighting for the honor of their sect. Those geniuses who came here to the Sage Devil Gorge naturally wouldn't take the initiative to teleport away. Before this, they were hunted down, and now the situation was reversed. They slaughtered until the heavens and earth turned dark, enjoying themselves to their heart's content until there were no more experts from the Dongshengshan Gate left to kill. At this moment, Qin Wentian's group of 5th-level ascendants already numbered over 50. There were also many extremely tyrannical geniuses among them. They were all ranked at the top of the 13 prefectures. Their auras towered up the heavens and were incomparably lofty, exuding a powerful aura. Among them, there was one person who stood out the most. This person had an ancient medallion on him, and on top of the medallion, there was a patch of thunderclouds. This was none other than a heaven chosen from the Thunder Prefecture. His name was Su Feng, and the number 1 behind it was 1. This meant that this person was the number 1 heaven's favorite of the Thunder Continent. Although this person was handsome and had a pale complexion, the qi that was faintly emitting from his body was extremely powerful. His slightly skinny body seemed to contain a terrifying amount of energy. He had a powerful aura that made people around him not dare to get too close to him. Other than Su Feng, there were 3 other top rankers of the Eastern Sage 13 prefectures. All of them were extremely outstanding, and although there was a distance between them and the top rankers, they could faintly feel that they were the center of attention. It was as though the top 3 rankers were existences that revolved around them. They were formless leaders. However, if one were to observe carefully, they would discover that at the back of the crowd, there were about 10 to 20 people surrounding a single figure. This figure seemed to be in the middle of the crowd, soaring through the air. His countenance was calm, and he was young and handsome. His eyes were deep and unfathomable, making him seem inconspicuous. However, those surrounding him were all people who had personally witnessed Qin Wentian's violence. They knew that the reason why the Sage Devil Gorge was in such a state now, the reason why the geniuses gathered here, was all because of this person. He was the initial leader of this group, and his strength was so strong that it was shocking. It was just that as the group grew stronger, he gradually retreated behind the scenes and retracted his aura, as though this group wasn't formed by him. In fact, some of the experts who came later didn't even know that this hunting group was formed by the 27th ranker of the Cloud Prefecture, Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian, it's so rare to see a disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate. How strange. Zi Qingxian and Qin Wentian flew side by side, soaring in the air. Her eyes were fixed ahead as a heavy expression could be seen on her face. It was as though she had sensed an unusual aura. Qin Wentian nodded his head in agreement. It wasn't just strange, it was extremely strange. During these days, he already understood that if a disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate was at the same level as him, they would be able to sense his movements. Hence, it was still possible for those at the same level as him to avoid him. But for those at the same level as him, it was impossible for them to not encounter him at all. Before this, they had already encountered many disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate, and there were people of all cultivation bases. Such an abnormal situation, in addition to the signal sent out by the Dongshengshan Gate a few days ago, should be the summons of the Dongshengshan Gate. Maybe now, the Dongshengshan Gate no longer wanted to be the prey. They realized that if they fought alone, they would die without a doubt. Hence, there was a high possibility that they were the same as them and had already started to gather people at the same level as them, preparing for a decisive battle. Although their lineup now was powerful, Qin Wentian wasn't too optimistic. He definitely wouldn't underestimate the strength of the Dongshengshan Gate. Firstly, they were in the open while the Dongshengshan Gate was in the shadows. From this point, they no longer had the initiative. Whether they wanted to start a battle or not, it was up to others to decide. I think it's time for us to stop. At that moment, Qin Wentian spoke. Suddenly, many people behind him stopped in their tracks. Those who had been moving forward for a while also stopped, turning around to look at Qin Wentian. The eyes of the geniuses all fell on Qin Wentian. He continued, "Something is wrong. I'm afraid that the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate are already waiting for us. If we continue to move forward blindly, we may fall into a passive situation. We have more than 50 cultivators. Why should we be afraid of the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate? Even if we have to fight them, it's fine." Some geniuses had a sharp look, their fighting spirit strong. We've hunted down many of the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Now, it's hard to meet another one on the road. It's true that the Dongshengshan Gate is gathering their strength. It's just that we don't know how strong the remaining strength of the Dongshengshan Gate is. Another cultivator analyzed calmly, knowing that the situation was somewhat abnormal. In fact, most of the cultivators had already realized it. It was impossible for the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate to not take action and let them hunt them down. What do you think? An expert stared at Qin Wentian and asked. This person was a genius from the Jing prefecture of the Eastern Sage 13 prefectures. In fact, he was one of the top 3 rankers of the Jing prefecture. His name was Lu Longcloud. It's time to disperse. We've killed so many disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate, they would definitely want to take revenge on us. They wouldn't even give us a chance to escape. We can only split up and move in different directions. That would be the best solution. For those who are weaker, you can hide within a small-scale spatial formation. Once you're surrounded, you can escape through the spatial formation. Qin Wentian spoke. If you're afraid, feel free to do as you please. Lu Longcloud coldly spoke to Qin Wentian, his tone somewhat unfriendly. Qin Wentian furrowed his brows only to hear someone beside Lu Longcloud speaking. There are over 50 geniuses here, including the top ranker of the Thunder Prefecture and the second ranker of the Jing Prefecture. Even if we really encountered them, we would still have the strength to fight them. But if we split up, wouldn't we be easily defeated? What intentions do you have by saying this? That's right. If we split up, the moment the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate take revenge, it would be the same as how we dealt with the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. The situation would be completely reversed. If you're afraid, you can just leave. I can see that you didn't put in much effort in the earlier battles. Someone coldly mocked. Your words are too egotistical. Brother Qin is only thinking for the sake of everyone here. When Brother Qin fought in 8 directions, you haven't even appeared yet. What qualifications do you have to say that Brother Qin didn't put in much effort? There were also experts standing on the side of Qin Wentian. That's right, I feel that Qin Wentian's words are logical. Many of the people surrounding Qin Wentian started to speak up for Qin Wentian. Both sides started to argue, there was actually a difference in opinion. Let's listen to Su Feng. Brother Su is the top ranker of the Thunder Prefecture and has the most authority to speak. Someone suggested. After that, the gazes of everyone turned to Su Feng only to see Su Feng glancing at Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian had no way to discern what Su Feng was thinking from his calm eyes. Since we're all gathered together, let's continue forward. If the enemies are too strong, we will retreat. Su Feng spoke. Instantly, many experts voiced their agreement. Ultimately, they still decided to move forward together. Qin Wentian didn't argue any further. In truth, even if they were surrounded, regardless of him or the top ranker of the Thunder Prefecture, Su Feng, it was impossible for them to die. They would be able to leave the battlefield at the first instant. The ones who were unlucky would always be the weaker ones. At this moment, a patch of red light suddenly appeared in the distant sky, dyeing the entire sky red. The people of the Sage Devil Gorge all turned their gazes in that direction. It was as though there was a heavenly phenomenon occurring. Let's go. Su Feng led his group and directly moved in that direction. Qin Wentian's brows were tightly furrowed. But when he saw the crowd moving forward unceasingly, he could only follow along. Brother Qin, there seems to be something fishy about this matter. A person at the side spoke to Qin Wentian. How could Su Feng and the others not know that there's something fishy going on? But he would still choose to go. Even for those who are hesitating, they can only choose to move forward when they see this situation. Qin Wentian spoke. The geniuses at the side nodded in agreement. Not long after, they arrived at the location where the patch of red light was located. This place was surrounded by mountain peaks, and the red light in the sky was red in color, but it was unknown how it was dyed red. Other than them, there were other groups here as well. These were all experts of the other cultivation levels. The people of the Sage Devil Gorge seemed to be heading over here as well. Senior brother, senior sister Qingxian. From not far away, a voice rang out. It was none other than the voice of Jun Mengchen from the 4th level ascendants. He stood there and waved at Qin Wentian. Gu Lufeng was also in the group. 9 groups, people of the 9 cultivation levels have all arrived here. Qin Wentian sighed in his heart. Seems like the location of the final battle would definitely be here. Before this, these participants had already killed many disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. The disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate would definitely have an extremely strong grudge against them. It was unknown how many experts would fall in this battle. Evidently, this was a premeditated trap that lured the participants of the various cultivation levels here. Everyone, let's make our preparations for battle. Someone spoke. Nobody here was stupid. When they saw the situation now, how could they not understand that the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate wanted to lure the participants here for the final battle? And the participants of the various cultivation levels were all very cooperative. 300 to 400 participants stood in the middle of the ancient mountain peaks. From afar, more and more silhouettes appeared. These people were all clad in similar long robes and had cold expressions on their faces. More and more experts gathered, surrounding all the geniuses who were participating in the trial. When the number of participants no longer increased, the participants discovered that the number of disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate who came here was twice as many as them. Xia Ho stood on a mountain peak. His eyes stared at the hundreds of participants as killing intent blazed in his eyes. He icily spoke, "This was originally a trial for all of you. Those who passed would become the core disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. You guys can accept this trial with peace of mind. Even if your strength is weaker, you would still have a chance to escape when faced with the attacks of outer or core disciples. However, all of you don't know what's good for you. You guys haven't even become a disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate yet you already chose the path of slaughter. Since this is the case, prepare to receive your punishment. Right now, the vast majority of you won't even have the chance to leave this place alive." As the sound of Xia Ho's voice faded, his killing intent gushed forth. The disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate stepped out at the same time, moving towards the experts of their respective cultivation levels. Even the elite disciples also stepped out. For a period of time, the entire space trembled as killing intent permeated the air. Facing against Qin Wentian and the other 5th level ascendants, there were close to 100 disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate, their auras majestic. Chapter 844. Just like what everyone had expected, the slaughter of the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate caused the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate to be completely enraged. They wanted to encircle and annihilate these participants. Even the elite disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate had to act personally. The disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate wanted to take revenge here. Qin Wentian and the other 50-plus experts gathered together, staring at the hundreds of heavens chosen of the Dongshengshan Gate. The aura of their opponents was even more terrifying. In terms of average strength, the elite and core disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate were clearly stronger than these heavens chosen. Not only that, the Dongshengshan Gate had the advantage in numbers. In such a battle, there was no need to think about the ending, they would definitely lose. Right now, they were thinking about how to deal with this. Should they fight to the death, or should they flee? How should we fight? Someone already started to shout. Even if this battle starts, there would still be 160 of them remaining. This means that as long as we persist, we would still be able to survive. A voice rang out, causing the expressions of the experts to turn solemn. That's right, as long as we persist till the end, we would still be able to survive. But who would be able to persist till the very end? The crowd glanced at each other, their will to fight wavered. They didn't expect that there would actually be so many experts of the Dongshengshan Gate in this Saint Devil Gorge. Su Feng, Lu Longcloud, the two of you are the strongest. This battle shall be led by the two of you. Upon seeing the disciples of the Dongxingxian Gate getting closer and closer, some turned their gazes to Su Feng and Lu Longcloud, placing their hopes on the strongest heavens chosen. "Brother Qin, you lead us." Those who had fought with Qin Wentian before gathered around Qin Wentian. They had personally witnessed how tyrannical Qin Wentian was. Compared to Su Feng and Lu Longcloud, they would rather believe in Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian stared at the people surrounding him. Their eyes were filled with hope. These people were all willing to believe in him, even if the top ranker of the Thunder Prefecture, Su Feng, was here. "Very well, I summoned you all here. Since you are willing to follow me, I will do my best to ensure your safety." Qin Wentian nodded. His words seemed to give everyone a reassurance. They all stood around Qin Wentian and said, "We are all willing to believe in Brother Qin. You decide how to fight, we will absolutely not object." "That's right. We'll fight as you say." Flames danced in the eyes of the crowd. Facing the experts of the Dongshengxian Gate, they were surrounded by a strong will to fight. "These bastards from the Dongshengxian Gate treated us like prey and hunted us down. How could they speak in such a righteous manner, as if we should be grateful to them for hunting us down? Once we resist, we will be committing heinous crimes, we will be unable to differentiate good from bad." An expert from the Eastern Sage Immortal Sect let out a low-sounding roar. The experts from the Eastern Sage Immortal Sect got closer and closer. They seemed to be extremely cautious as well. Evidently, what happened in the Sage Devil Gorge earlier made them even more cautious. They knew that among these participants, there were some existences that were extremely tough to antagonize. The 27th ranker of the Cloud Prefecture, Qin Wentian, was among this group of people. It seemed like he was the one who launched the first counterattack. Even when facing the encirclement of the disciples of the Dongshengxian Gate, he was still able to escape safely. He was so infuriated that he directly roared and started to hunt down the disciples of the Dongshengxian Gate. His aura grew stronger and stronger as time passed, forming into a violent storm that caused the disciples of the Dongshengxian Gate to suffer heavy casualties. They had to be careful of this person. A bunch of motley crew. At this moment, they actually want to split up and fight for themselves. The experts who followed Su Feng all had unsightly expressions on their faces when they saw the strength gathered around Qin Wentian. Originally, they were already in a disadvantageous position. And now, their strength had actually split up. That's right, at this moment, they should gather their strength. Another sharp gaze shot over, staring at Qin Wentian. A mere 27th ranker of the Cloud Prefecture actually had so many experts following him. Su Feng also turned his gaze onto Qin Wentian. His countenance was calm, no emotions could be seen. As for the second ranker of the Jing Prefecture, Lu Longcloud, he directly spoke, "Since all of you are willing to follow him, it's best for you all not to get close to him after the battle." Lu Longcloud's words seemed to want to completely split this group of experts into two camps. As they were speaking, the experts of the Dongshengxian Gate had already rushed over. Violent constellations of different colors flashed in the sky as an apocalyptic might gushed over, wanting to crush this entire space. Over 100 celestial phenomenon ascendants, even if it was just a single attack, it would already contain the might to destroy the heavens and earth. Just imagine, if 100 experts attacked at the same time, the might of their innate techniques would all descend upon them. Very swiftly, the spectators saw over 100 fifth-level ascendants of the Dongshengxian Gate gathering their attacks at the same time, blasting towards Qin Wentian's group. The howling of the raging wind was extremely ear-piercing, the power of their attacks converged together, transforming into a tempest of destruction, akin to a black hole of doomsday, wanting to devour the experts. "Attack, tear their formation apart," Su Feng commanded. The geniuses on this side also unleashed their attacks. For those who could last until now, there weren't many weaklings among them. All of them were outstanding geniuses and their attacks contained heaven-shaking might. Qin Wentian's battle chi gushed forth as his bloodline power surged. He released his suppression constellation as he lifted both his palms, suppressing the heavens. This entire space turned incomparably violent as rumbling sounds rang out unceasingly. The heavens and earth split apart as beams of destructive light ravaged the air, tearing apart the bodies of several geniuses. That deafening rumbling sounds directly killed them, and there were even many who were suppressed to the ground. The formation of the Dongshengshan Gate was completely thrown into disarray. In the air, the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate were still in formation, preparing to launch their second attack. "Follow me to break out of the encirclement." Qin Wendian spoke. Terrifying rumbling sounds rang out as his body grew taller at an insane speed. His entire body circulated with a dazzling light as dazzling runic light circulated around it. Rumble. Qin Wendian's body grew larger and larger, reaching a height of over 100 meters in the blink of an eye and was still growing. His hands grabbed out, shaking the heavens and earth, directly grabbing towards the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Terrifying rumbling sounds rang out unceasingly. Qin Wendian's body grew to a height of over 300 meters. How terrifying was this? The experts in the air were so shocked that they all scattered away, breaking their formation. In fact, there were even 2 disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate who were directly killed by his palms. Go! Qin Wendian stepped out in large strides as the rumbling sounds reverberated through the air. Both his palms ferociously blasted out once more. His gigantic palms shone with boundless runic light, suppressing the heavens and earth. Those disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate frenziedly attacked, clashing against his palms. Below, the experts who followed Qin Wendian also lifted their palms to attack, helping Qin Wendian to open up a path for him. As for Su Feng and the others, they killed their way towards another direction. The 2 groups of experts officially split up, each taking a different path. In this region surrounded by ancient mountains, the experts of the other cultivation levels also started to clash against each other. They were all intercepted by the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. In an instant, the battle didn't stop. Rumbling sounds rang out unceasingly as the earth was torn apart. In fact, there were even some mountain peaks that were shattered by the aftershocks of the battle. This was simply too violent and terrifying. Violent and chaotic, this was the current situation in this vast region. The ultimate battle between the 9 cultivation levels had completely erupted here. Although there were still some geniuses who didn't participate in the battle in other locations, they were already a very small number. Almost all of the geniuses who participated in the tempering exercise had already gathered here. In the group of 5th level ascendants, Qin Wendian's body had already expanded to a height of over 500 meters. His entire body shone with fiend god light, as well as a terrifying blood-colored glow. At this moment, Qin Wendian was like a supreme demon king with towering battle might. With a lift of his palm, he could crush the heavens and earth. The outer sect disciples couldn't even withstand a single strike from him. As long as there were people who dared to block his palm imprints, they would die instantly. In the blink of an eye, 7 to 8 people were slapped to death by him. Naturally, Qin Wendian himself also suffered quite a number of attacks. Because of the size of his body, he had no way to evade all the attacks, causing fresh blood to flow from his body. How powerful! There were a total of 20 geniuses who followed Qin Wendian. They floated in the air around Qin Wendian, staring at his imposing figure. All of them could feel how powerful Qin Wendian was. As geniuses who participated in the tempering exercise, they naturally had their own pride and arrogance. But when facing against Qin Wendian, they had to admit defeat. In addition, given Qin Wendian's towering strength, if he wanted to leave, who could obstruct him? Nobody could obstruct him. However, he was the one who shouldered the heavens for them. Just because these people followed him and believed in him, he didn't mind enduring the majority of the attacks alone. His gigantic body was stained with wounds. Beside Qin Wendian's gigantic body, there was a silhouette revolving around him, fighting shoulder to shoulder with him. This beautiful silhouette was shrouded in divine light as a divine falcon enveloped her, exuding magnificence through the generations. This silhouette was none other than Ziqing Xian. We can't allow Brother Qin to endure so much pressure. Let's kill him together. Yeah, Brother Qin alone shouldered the heavens and earth. We are all geniuses of the various prefectures, How can we live under the protection of Brother Qin? Numerous voices rang out. The geniuses who participated in the tempering exercise were all demon-level geniuses of the various prefectures and were extremely arrogant. At this moment, their blood boiled as they all soared up into the air, protecting Qin Wentian and fighting shoulder to shoulder with Qin Wentian, opening up a path for them. Boom! Qin Wentian stomped on the ground. Every step he took caused the earth to crumble and crumble. His palms blasted out countless battle bells as the chimes of the bells echoed out. A core disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate died under the might of the bell chimes. Those experts from the Eastern Sage Immortal sect who were rushing over to Qin Wentian were all in a chaotic formation. But behind Qin Wentian, there was a core disciple whose eyes gleamed with a blood-red light. He unleashed his own constellation, which was akin to a black hole of destruction. Beside him, the energy of the experts from the Eastern Sage Immortal sect continued to pour into his constellation unceasingly, being devoured and digested. A destructive might that could destroy the heavens and earth was being brewed. His eyes stared fixedly at Qin Wentian. The sins of this man were too deep, he had killed too many disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Qin Wentian's talent was high and originally, he was destined to be a member of the Dongshengshan Gate, directly becoming an elite disciple. However, his hands were stained with the blood of too many people and he was destined to die here today. After devouring the energy of 6 to 7 people, a blood-colored black hole manifested in his constellation, resembling a blooming blood-colored devil flower. He stepped out like the wind and with a wave of his hand, this blood-colored devil flower of destruction shot towards Qin Wentian's gigantic body. In just an instant, a destructive storm of darkness manifested in the air, engulfing everything in its path. Chapter 845. This terrifying tempest was generated by the blood-colored devil flower. It expanded unceasingly, resembling a true black hole. From the sky, this black hole could really devour the 1,500-meter-tall Qin Wentian hole. It was extremely terrifying. Qin Wentian inclined his head and stared at the blood-colored black hole. There seemed to be a boundless destructive tempest gushing out from within. It was extremely terrifying. This caused Qin Wentian to furrow his brows. The elite disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate shouldn't have such powerful attacks. Even for sage child characters, they might not be able to do so, right? The battle chi radiating from him towered up into the sky. When he blasted out with both palms, a constellation manifested, flattening the void as it blasted towards the black hole. The violent turbulence churned the entire space. The eyes of the elite disciple who unleashed this attack gleamed with a blood-colored light. He then spoke to the experts beside him, "Gather the energy from your constellation and infuse it into my blood-colored devil flower." The experts all stood beside him, infusing their attacks into the blood-colored devil flower. This devil flower seemed to be born from his constellation. His constellation was extremely unique, it could devour the energy of others and transform it into a blood-colored devil flower, creating a destructive black hole that could devour everything. This type of constellation was definitely an extremely powerful variant-type constellation. Qin Wentian's palms shook the sky as he frenziedly attacked. However, the energy within the black hole grew more and more terrifying. It was as though the energy from the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate was being devoured by the black hole, causing chaos in this space. Beside Qin Wentian, the other experts were also frenziedly attacking the black hole. However, it was completely useless. That black hole was like a bottomless pit, unceasingly devouring their energy, making their strength seem extremely insignificant. Even Qin Wentian was furrowing his brows. This attack was too bizarre. It unceasingly pressed down with the power to destroy the heavens and earth. Right above his head, he could faintly sense the terrifying momentum of this attack wanting to destroy him. Let's destroy this devil flower from its source. We can't let Brother Qin endure it alone. A heaven-chosen spoke. After that, he roared in rage as he brandished his 3-meter-long spear and soared up into the air, rushing towards the source of the black hole, that terrifying blood-colored devil flower. Kill them. The battle chi of the spectators towered up into the sky. Upon seeing the experts of the Eastern Sage Immortal sect joining forces to kill Qin Wendian, they had to do something. Kill, kill, kill. A thunderous roar shook the heavens. The figure wielding the 3-meter-long spear roared in rage as his constellation fused together with the spear, piercing towards the devil flower. The other experts all launched their attacks as well, unleashing destructive attacks. You're courting death. That elite disciple had a cold look in his eyes. He struck out with his palm and it was like a black hole that swallowed the spear. It was as though he wanted to swallow the spear whole. The disciples of Dongshengshan Gate immediately rushed over and attacked the elite disciples. Buzz! A raging wind howled as numerous divine falcons swooped down from the sky, aiming to kill the elite disciples. Zi Qingxian had divine blood in her body. She was clad in the light of a divine falcon, resembling a goddess that descended to the mortal world. Rumbling sounds could be heard as she blasted through the air, directly tearing apart the bodies of 2 people. She then broke through the encirclement and rushed towards that elite disciple with irresistible force. The other geniuses also unleashed their most intense attacks, killing their way towards the devil flower. They had to destroy it no matter what, reducing the pressure on Qin Wendian. Do you guys want to die so badly in his place? The blood-colored eyes of that elite disciple flickered with malevolence, as though he was in a frenzy. All of you retreat. Qin Wendian roared. His palms blasted out like a raging storm, causing the black hole to tremble. However, at this moment, that elite disciple also let out a terrifying howl of rage. All of you can go to hell. Qin Wendian's countenance drastically changed. After that, he felt a heaven-annihilating might exploding forth. The terrifying black hole was collapsing as a suffocating destructive might gushed forth. The disciples of Dongshengshan Gate unleashed their attacks at the same time as they soared into the air, leaving this place. The other geniuses also sensed that this destructive force was too strong. They all retreated, but it was already too late for the people at the front. The black hole storm erupted with beams of light of calamity, directly smashing into the bodies of the geniuses. The black beams of calamity directly tore their bodies apart. Their eyes were filled with despair. Cracking sounds rang out incessantly as their bodies completely exploded. In that area, a devil cloud of destruction churned wildly. Qin Wendian saw the first genius who rushed over with his spear was the first to die. His eyes flashed with a tyrannical light as the killing intent from his body gushed forth. In that single strike, 4 people were killed by the destructive might. Each of them had an arm torn off as they screamed in agony. Zi Qingxian was also injured by the aftershocks. If it wasn't for the fact that the people at the back retreated quickly, this destructive might would have affected even more people. These geniuses all turned ashen as they stared at the disciples of Dongshengshan Gate in the air. Before this, because they were separated from Su Feng and the others, the disciples of Dongshengshan Gate were split into 2 groups. There were 40 to 50 people in each group and now, there were still over 30 of them remaining. Their auras were extremely terrifying and at this moment, they once again gathered around that elite disciple, preparing to launch a second wave of attacks. Arg! The countenances of the geniuses were all malevolent as they let out low-sounding roars of rage. Their auras towered up into the sky. Boom, boom, boom. A series of ear-piercing crackling sounds rang out unceasingly as the rumbling shockwaves soared up into the sky. The expressions of the crowd flickered as they stared at Qin Wendian. They only saw Qin Wendian's 1,500-meter-tall body radiating a towering divine battle light as battle halos revolved around him. All 3 levels of the battle art were unleashed and at this moment, his strength was so strong that it could shake the heavens and earth. It was sufficient to cause even geniuses at the same level to feel fear, as though they were facing an undefeatable supreme battle king. Upon seeing that the elite disciple was once again gathering his strength, Qin Wendian's rage towered up into the sky. With a roar of rage, numerous terrifying suppressive silhouettes and gigantic swords slammed out. At the same time, he blasted out battle bells, causing the disciples of Dongshengshan Gate to feel as though their souls were about to scatter. Die! Qin Wendian's gigantic frame soared up into the air as the battle bell blasted out. The experts of the Eastern Sage Immortal sect joined forces to defend against it, unceasingly attacking and finally shattering the battle bell. However, at this moment, two gigantic palm imprints that blotted out the sky blasted over, directly slamming into the bodies of the experts. There was no energy that could block his attack, and in an instant, a few of the experts from the Eastern Sage Immortal sect died. Qin Wentian's 1,500-meter-tall body soared up into the sky, directly disrupting the attack formation of the disciples of Dongshengshan Gate. Those people crazily launched attacks at Qin Wentian, yet Qin Wentian's entire body was shimmering with runic light as the ringing of bells could be heard from time to time. It was as though he had completely disregarded the attacks of many experts. With a roar of rage, he slashed out with his sword and at the same time, both of his palms blasted out. In an instant, tens of towering palm imprints were blasted out. Terrifying booming sounds rang out unceasingly as more experts were killed. "Kill him!" that elite disciple roared. Qin Wentian had gone mad, forcefully enduring their attacks. He would rather suffer injuries just to kill them. "Kill him!" The disciples of Dongshengshan Gate rushed towards Qin Wentian's gigantic body in a frenzy. All sorts of astonishing powers erupted forth as they attacked Qin Wentian. "Kill!" The geniuses below also reacted. One by one, they soared up into the sky to support Qin Wentian. Everyone was completely enraged. They didn't care about the price, they had to kill these disciples of Dongshengshan Gate. "I'll take the brunt of the attacks," Qin Wentian roared. Boundless battle bells radiated from his body as the incomparably powerful battle halo and runic light circulated around his body. This caused the attacks of the disciples of Dongshengshan Gate to unceasingly land on him, yet they were only able to shatter the surface of his body. However, with the incomparably gigantic palms of Qin Wentian, there would be people dying with each strike. Nobody could withstand the power of Qin Wentian at this moment. Boundless might was infused into the fiend god heavenly suppression art. In addition to the power of his bloodline, the runic light from the fiend god body refinement art, his gigantic physique, and the three-layered battle art, Qin Wentian simply transformed into a supreme god of war, capable of annihilating all existences. "I don't believe it, let's see how long he can last." A disciple of Dongshengshan Gate howled in madness. With so many of them attacking Qin Wentian together, they actually couldn't kill him at all. Such humiliation wasn't inferior to the threat of death. All of them were fifth-level ascendants of the Dongshengshan Gate, and there were even core and elite disciples among them. How could they not be able to kill Qin Wentian even if they attacked him with all their might? "Yeah, his external defenses have already been destroyed. We have to kill him no matter what." All the experts of Dongshengshan Gate aimed their attacks at Qin Wentian's gigantic physique. Destructive might blasted out unceasingly, causing the external defenses of Qin Wentian to crumble unceasingly. But at the same time, Qin Wentian's palms slashed through the air, containing a supreme suppressive might within. Every time he attacked, at least two people would die. At the same time, those experts who followed Qin Wentian also frenziedly attacked. Zi Qingxian transformed into a divine falcon, tearing apart the bodies of her opponents. In just a short period of time, the experts of Dongshengshan Gate were only left with over 10 people. They no longer had an advantage in terms of numbers. "Shatter. If we continue attacking, he will be a dead man." That elite disciple who unleashed the destructive might of the black hole earlier roared in rage. Although the surface of Qin Wentian's body was still glowing with runic light, he was already covered in blood. "Kill." The experts of Dongshengshan Gate had already entered a frenzied state. Even if they had to die, they had to kill Qin Wentian. As long as Qin Wentian died, the others wouldn't be able to pose any threat to them. Boom, boom. Another 3 people were crushed to death by Qin Wentian. The other experts also slayed another expert. The number of experts of Dongshengshan Gate continued to decrease, but they once again launched a collective attack on Qin Wentian. They spared no expense to kill Qin Wentian. Roar, roar, roar. An earth-shattering roar of a demonic beast rang out as a sudden change occurred. A primordial demon king revolved around Qin Wentian and was even larger compared to Qin Wentian. It directly enveloped Qin Wentian within, like a layer of demonic light. No matter how terrifying the attacks blasted over, they had no way to shatter this primordial demon king. Initially, I didn't want to start a massacre. But since you guys want to force me, I shall grant you your wish. Qin Wentian's voice was like a demon, so cold that it could pierce the bones. Chapter 846. From the start, Qin Wentian didn't use his full strength in combat. After all, to him, the battle in the Sage Devil Gorge was nothing more than a tempering exercise. He only needed to pass this test. There was no need for him to put his life on the line. Hence, when he first stepped into the Sage Devil Gorge, he killed those who came to hunt him down. He didn't clean up the corpse and only used it as a deterrent, hoping that he wouldn't be disturbed by others. But clearly, he was wrong. What happened next exceeded his expectations. More and more experts from the Dongshengshan Gate came to hunt him down. If it wasn't for the fact that he had so many trump cards in his hands, he would have long since died. When Xia Ho used the excuse of his character to lead the disciples of the Eastern Sage Immortals sect to surround him, Qin Wentian was truly enraged. Hence, he started his path of slaughter. But even so, although he was venting his anger, he wasn't completely crazy yet. He only wanted Xia Ho to pay the price. For those geniuses who stood at the peak, they wouldn't reveal all their trump cards too early unless they were in a life-and-death situation. This was something that was inevitable. But the people of the Dongshengshan Gate seemed to be determined to kill him. They killed several people who were willing to follow him, and he didn't even have the time to rescue them before they were engulfed by the destructive light. This caused the flames of his anger to burn crazily, causing him to truly sink into a state of madness. And the people of the Dongshengshan Gate also went crazy, going all out just to kill him. Since this was the case, he could only kill them all. Only then would he be able to protect himself and those who followed him. At this moment, the bloodline protection in his body was activated. The bloodline energy flowing in his body was unleashed to the maximum. That ancient demon that seemed to have originated from the primordial era, vaguely resembling Qin Wentian, protected him tightly. Incomparably violent energy blasted over, yet it was unable to destroy this ancient demon protector. Qin Wentian's low-sounding roar shook the hearts of everyone. At the instant he inclined his head, the ancient demon protector lifted its head as well. Its terrifying demonic eyes pierced through the eyes of the experts of the Dongshengshan Gate, directly piercing into their hearts, causing their hearts to pound violently. Before this, Qin Wentian was already terrifying enough. But when this incomparably violent bloodline demon protector appeared, the entire sky was filled with an incomparably tyrannical demonic chi, wanting to prostrate the myriad of demons, causing everyone to tremble. Die! Qin Wentian roared in a low voice. His gigantic palm stretched out and directly grabbed towards the elite disciple who created the black hole earlier. That gigantic palm seemed to be enveloped by an incomparably demonic light as it grabbed towards the elite disciple. That elite disciple's countenance drastically changed. He unleashed his constellation to its limits, wanting to destroy everything. With a flick of his finger, the black hole devoured everything, transforming into a blood-colored devil flower. Bang! A towering blood-colored demonic light slammed down, directly shattering the blood-colored devil flower. Qin Wentian's palm imprint blasted onto the blood-colored devil flower, yet the ancient demon's palm imprint was like a corporeal entity, directly grabbing towards that elite disciple, as though he was an ant. Release me! That elite disciple let out a frenzied howl. His entire body was trembling violently. At this moment, death was so close, it felt as though it could descend at any moment. His eyes stared in the direction of Qin Wentian, only to see a pair of blood-colored demonic eyes that could pierce through the hearts of others. Boom! The demonic palm smashed down, causing fresh blood to splatter. That elite disciple was directly smashed into pieces, his soul dissipating, unable to withstand a single strike. In the surroundings of Qin Wentian, the other geniuses also frenziedly attacked, killing several disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Because earlier, they gave it their all, disregarding everything, only wanting to kill Qin Wentian. However, they were obstructed by the demonic beast protector, and all their attacks were focused on Qin Wentian. This directly caused some of them to be unable to defend in time and were killed. Not only that, the strongest elite disciple among them also died, killed by a single palm strike from Qin Wentian. The ending of this battle seemed to have been decided. More than 50 disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate actually suffered a crushing defeat. This sounded so ridiculous. After this strike, everyone in the battle actually paused for a moment. Looking at the 500-meter-tall figure that seemed to be the descendant of the primordial demon king, they were all in a trance. How many types of powers did this young man have? Sometimes, his battle chi was monstrous, with battle halos around his body, like a war king. Sometimes, his body shone with divine light, suppressing everything. And now, he was like a demon from the primordial era, too terrifying. Those geniuses who followed Qin Wentian were completely speechless. They had never seen such a tyrannical character at the same level as them. This young man should have surpassed the pinnacle of this realm. They really couldn't imagine what kind of person could defeat an existence like Qin Wentian at the same level as them. They suddenly realized that maybe in this grand banquet, the person before them would have a place in the top 3. Not only did they realize this, the other disciples of the Eastern Sage Immortal sect also felt the same way. They felt regret in their hearts. Why did they have to hunt down Qin Wentian and spare no expense to kill him? If they allowed him to leave, they wouldn't be in such a situation now. The people of the Eastern Sage Immortal sect were facing the danger of being annihilated. Go! It was unknown who it was that let out a roar. The disciples of the Eastern Sage Immortal sect instantly reacted and fled in the direction they came from. They no longer wished to continue fighting. That was a path of death. Right now, only by regrouping with the other experts would they have a chance of survival. Roar! A terrifying roar of a demonic beast shook the heavens and earth. Qin Wentian stomped on the ground and blasted out with both of his hands. The gigantic and terrifying demonic arms slashed out together, destroying everything in front of him. Boom, boom, boom. Several consecutive sounds rang out. Every explosion signified the death of a disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate. In front of the current Qin Wentian, not a single one of them could withstand a single attack. Too powerful. The Qin Wentian at this moment was no longer on the same level as them. The others were frantically fleeing for their lives. Fear was written all over their faces as their hearts pounded. Death was just too close to them. Don't even think of leaving. An incomparably demonic voice drifted over, as though it was right beside their ears. Behind them, rumbling sounds rang out unceasingly as the earth beneath them was torn apart. There were a few people who were fleeing shoulder to shoulder when they suddenly felt a terrifying demonic light beside them. When they turned their heads to take a look, they were instantly frightened out of their wits, as though their hearts were about to jump out from their throats. Beside them, that incomparably gigantic demonic silhouette seemed to have separated itself from Qin Wentian's body. It tilted its body and stood shoulder to shoulder with them. The gigantic head of the demonic silhouette was so terrifying that one could faintly see the silhouette of Qin Wentian. 2 arms stretched out. The disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate let out incomparably terrified screams as they closed their eyes. At this moment, there was only despair in their hearts. The demonic palms grabbed over, crushing their bodies into smithereens. Naturally, this was also because the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate had already lost their will to fight. They didn't even dare to fight and could only flee with all their might. If they were captured, only death awaited them. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The earth unceasingly split apart as numerous experts fell. Finally, that terrifying demonic palm killed the last person and this battle was finally concluded. Qin Wentian's camp paid the price of losing several experts to annihilate an army of over 50 disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate. Not a single one was spared. This was simply too terrifying. The experts behind all sped over, landing beside Qin Wentian. They stared at the vanishing disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate as well as the terrifying fissures in the ground. All of them felt a sense of surrealism in their hearts. A fifth-level ascendant actually had such destructive power. Xi Qingxuan's beautiful eyes flickered as she stared at Qin Wentian. She was also extremely taken aback. Qin Wentian's combat prowess far exceeded her expectations. Although she had already overestimated Qin Wentian, she didn't expect him to be so powerful to this extent. Qin Wentian was like a person with no weaknesses at all. Not only that, every aspect of his strength had already reached the pinnacle, completely unshakable. Qin Wentian, who was going all out in combat, was like the king of slaughter. Those disciples opened their mouths, wanting to say something, but at this moment, they didn't know what to say. They could sense that Qin Wentian was a character on a completely different level from them. Even if they wanted to call him Brother Qin, they couldn't even say it out loud anymore. The protection of Qin Wentian's bloodline power gradually vanished. The violent aura radiating from him also calmed down. His 1,500-meter-tall body shrunk back to his normal size as he took out a few robes and wrapped them around himself. The astral light radiating from him had yet to dissipate. He stared at the others and spoke, "In this battle, several of our brothers have fallen. I've let them down. Brother Qin has already done enough. If it wasn't for Brother Qin, I'm afraid all of us would have died here. In this battle, Brother Qin fought alone." Someone sighed deeply. These weren't words of courtesy but were spoken from the depths of his heart. "That's right, we followed you to battle. Brother Qin doesn't owe us anything. If he wanted to leave, it would be extremely easy for him to do so. Yet, he chose to fight for us, not hesitating to go crazy. We aren't blind, how can we not see that the deaths of our brothers were all accidents? Brother Qin had no way to save them at that moment." Everyone spoke, their eyes were filled with respect for Qin Wentian. Leaving aside Qin Wentian's strength, just his character of fighting for them was already sufficient to earn their respect. If not, why would Qin Wentian need to risk his life to fight, not even hesitating to go crazy and unleash heaven-shaking might, cleansing the experts of the Dongshengshan Gate clean with blood? It's a pity for our fallen brothers. Qin Wentian sighed. His gaze swept the surroundings. Their battle didn't attract too much attention from the other regions. Because, in each region, the most violent battles were happening. The experts of the various cultivation levels were all fighting for their own lives, they basically had no time to be distracted by the battles in other regions. The earth-shattering, destructive battle continued madly, but the number of people had already decreased by a lot. It was unknown how many geniuses had died in this battle. Chapter 847. Standing in the middle of the battlefield, Qin Wentian and the others stared at their surroundings, feeling waves of coldness. This should be the true portrayal of the immortal realms. The Eastern Sage 13 prefectures were organizing a grand event every 100 years, but for this grand event, the geniuses from all over the 13 prefectures had to risk their lives for it. It was cruel and realistic. These geniuses were all demon-level characters from the 13 prefectures. If they were willing to live in a remote corner, they might be able to live a more comfortable life. But if they had ambitions and dreams, they had no choice but to accept the cruel trials, gaining a new life amidst the blazing flames of blood and tears, growing unceasingly and transforming, becoming a true expert, someone like those supreme characters of the Dongshengshan Gate. Naturally, those geniuses also gambled like this before they obtained their current achievements. On their path of growth, how many outstanding geniuses of the same generation had they trampled over? Only they themselves knew. In fact, if they still wanted to climb higher, they would have to continue on their journey until one day, they could stand at the peak of the immortal realms. Using the blood of geniuses to create this grand event. Qin Wentian mumbled. Although his body was somewhat fatigued, his back was still as straight as a 1,000-year-old pine tree. Despite the torrential rain, he wouldn't bend his back at all. He had his own story, his own dreams, and also a responsibility. He longed to stand together with that holy maiden who had once silently sacrificed herself for him. He longed to not be looked down upon by others, he longed to have the ability to look straight at the heavens. He longed to search for his origins, to search for the legendary story of his parents. Hence, he had to straighten his back and walk forward with unwavering determination, no matter how many thorns there were on the road ahead. Yeah, the Eastern Sage 13 prefectures have always been contending for supremacy. From the start until now, blood has been spilled for every round of selection. When the Eastern Sage Immortal Emperor finally accepts the final 3 disciples, how many people would have to die for the sake of those 3? The spectators at the side also sighed in admiration. Those 3 who were the last to succeed were destined to have no fate with them. With a supreme demon-level genius like Gusu Tianqi, as well as a radiant genius like Qin Wentian, they could truly feel the disparity between them. The gap between geniuses could not be made up for. But the 3 who are selected in the end will soar into the sky. With their own talents and the careful training of the Dongshengshan Gate, they might even have the chance to become the personal disciples of the Dongsheng Heaven Emperor. They will only become more and more outstanding. Brother Qin, among us, you are probably the only one with hope. You must seize this opportunity. Someone beside him stared at Qin Wentian and gave his blessing. I will definitely enter the top 3. Qin Wentian spoke in a low voice, his words containing the conviction of an expert. However, he only said that he would enter the top 3, he didn't say anything else. Even if he entered the top 3, he wouldn't necessarily have to take the Eastern Sage Immortal Emperor as his master. We all believe in you. The people beside him nodded heavily. They didn't know what Qin Wentian was thinking in his heart. They were all filled with anticipation for Qin Wentian to become a sage child character of the Dongshengshan Gate. Only Zi Qingshuan's eyes flickered with a strange light. Only she knew the ultimate goal of Qin Wentian, Jun Mengchen and herself. The top 3, but not the Eastern Sage Immortal Emperor. In this battlefield, only Qin Wentian and his companions could have a moment of leisure. The battles between the various factions were still going on. The other 30-plus 5th-level ascendants who were in the same camp as Qin Wentian and his companions weren't as lucky as them. After being surrounded, they suffered heavy casualties. Although Su Feng and the other geniuses they had high hopes for were tyrannical, they were still taken care of. At the same time, there were many experts ganging up on them. In addition, Su Feng wasn't willing to use his full strength to fight for those he wasn't familiar with. Very quickly, he begged the other experts to leave. After all, his strength was still extremely tyrannical, it wasn't too difficult for him to leave. Those disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate didn't pursue Su Feng. Instead, they continued to surround and kill the other geniuses, causing the other experts to be in a miserable state. They began to flee in different directions. Along the way, they were intercepted and killed. Sometimes, some of them died. If they had known this would happen, they would have listened to Qin Wentian and disbanded earlier. At this moment, there were 2 experts frantically running in the same direction. These 2 geniuses were severely injured, and there were 6 to 7 people chasing after them. The distance between the 2 parties was getting closer and closer. The disciples of Dongshengshan Gate had a hideous smile on their faces as if they were toying with them. They said coldly, "You won't be able to escape." Arg! The 2 of them howled madly in anger. They bit their lips, releasing their astral energy to the extreme as they fled madly. However, they still couldn't shake off the people behind them. They felt some despair. At this moment, they saw a group of silhouettes standing in front of them. They seemed to be very relaxed, not fighting at all, as if they had nothing to do. When they saw the faces of these people clearly, their hearts violently twitched. How could this be possible? Where were the experts of the Dongshengshan Gate? Qin Wentian and the others also saw these 2. One of them was the one who mocked Qin Wentian the loudest earlier, saying that Qin Wentian and the others were just a bunch of mobs, trying to divide them. Pairs of eyes stared at each other. Qin Wentian and the others' countenances were indifferent and calm. After experiencing this battle, many of them had a trip to the gates of hell. If it wasn't for Qin Wentian's strength and his crazy protection, all of them would have died. As for those people opposite them, since they chose to follow Su Feng, they chose their own path. In that case, they should face the consequences themselves. Rumble. numerous attacks rained down. Evidently, the experts of the Dongshengshan Gate had noticed the group of people ahead. They quickened their pace and directly launched their attacks over, landing on the bodies of those two experts. The two of them trembled violently as they coughed out blood. They got closer and closer to Qin Wentian and the others. One of them asked, "How did you guys do it?" His eyes were bloodshot and his aura was extremely weak. But even so, he still wanted to understand why these people were unharmed. Qin Wentian used his strength to kill the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate and protected us. This is all because we chose to follow him. One of them spoke. When the two of them heard this, they first started. After that, expressions of madness appeared on their faces as they laughed maniacally. That's right, these people chose to follow Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian actually protected them. But the Su Feng they chose to follow actually abandoned everyone and left. Even Lu Longcloud chose to leave alone. This was truly cruel. They were filled with hatred. Boom! Destructive energy gushed forth. The two of them let out roars of despair before they were engulfed by the destructive energy and were directly annihilated. The disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate who killed them all frowned when they saw Qin Wentian and the others. Where were the other experts of the Dongshengshan Gate who surrounded them? Was it really like what that person said earlier? All of them were killed by Qin Wentian. All of them stared at Qin Wentian, their eyes filled with trepidation. This was a heaven's chosen that they had always wanted to kill but were unable to do so. Qin Wentian had an unparalleled combat prowess, and regardless of core or elite disciples, many of them had died in his hands. At this level of cultivation, it was as though there was no one who could kill him. Scram! Qin Wentian spat out a single word. Those disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate all had unsightly expressions on their faces, yet they didn't dare to retaliate. They could only turn and leave with their tails between their legs. The expressions on their faces were as unsightly as one could imagine. They were disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate, yet they were being slaughtered by a genius who didn't even mask his humiliation. Yet, they didn't even have the courage to reply. How laughable was this? They were actually afraid that if they replied, Qin Wentian would kill them all in a fit of rage. Maybe Qin Wentian was already sick of killing. At this moment, he didn't continue killing and chose to let those people leave. This cruel battle had already caused the deaths of many geniuses. It should be ending soon, right? All of you, stop fighting. At this moment, a thunderous voice thundered through the air, causing everyone to instantly stop fighting. In fact, there were even some who retracted their attacks. To people at their level, they could already retract their attacks as they wished. Now that an immortal king of the Dongshengshan Gate had issued an order, who would dare to disobey? 160 participants have already appeared. All of you can exit through a small-scale spatial formation. That imposing voice rang out once more, containing a hint of unhappiness within. Xia Ho also stopped fighting. He had actually participated in this battle earlier. Upon hearing that imposing voice, his heart crumbled. He stood on the mountain peak and swept his gaze over the surroundings, as though he was searching for something. In this battle, Qin Wentian should have already died, right? But at this moment, when his gaze landed in a certain direction, his countenance alternated between shades of green and white. How could this be possible? That person actually didn't die. In addition, that person seemed to have sensed something. His gaze actually penetrated through space and stared in Xia Ho's direction. That cold gaze was like a silent provocation. It was as though he was telling Xia Ho that he, Qin Wentian, was still standing there and was destined to become the center of attention of everyone. After this battle, Qin Wentian would be promoted and would definitely become a core disciple or even an elite disciple. If he wanted to kill Qin Wentian again, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. He had already missed the best opportunity. After that, Qin Wentian turned and left the battlefield with the others, searching for a spatial formation as they left the Sage Devil Gorge. This trial has finally ended. Outside the Sage Devil Gorge, numerous figures appeared. Regardless of those who had already exited, or the remaining 160 participants, as well as the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate, all of them appeared here and were clearly divided into 3 camps. Those who were eliminated and could only become outer disciples, those who succeeded in becoming core disciples, and those who succeeded in becoming Dongshengshan Gate disciples. Those who will become outer disciples, leave with him. If you are unwilling, you can choose to leave as well. The immortal king at the front pointed to a black-robed figure beside him. That black-robed figure nodded to the outer disciples before leading them away. This time, the disciples of the Dongshengshan Gate will be hunted down. Leave by yourselves. The elite disciples will be sent to the immortal punishment palace to await further orders. That immortal king continued, his words causing the hearts of the elite disciples to tremble. Xia Ho was so frightened that his countenance turned pale as he left with trepidation in his heart. Congratulations to everyone, you have already obtained the qualifications to become a core disciple of the Dongshengshan Gate. Next, you will be participating in the immortal banquet of the Dongshengshan Gate. Many famous supreme characters will be present. That immortal king smiled as he stared at everyone, no longer as solemn as before. Although these people were only core disciples, many of them had the potential to become elite disciples since they were able to persist until now after numerous rounds of selection. Core disciple status was merely a treatment they received the moment they joined the sect.